Chapter 1184. The King of Blood Demons was comparable to an expert at the 8th layer of the Divine Dwelling Realm. In addition, the Blood Demons had a special structure, an extremely powerful physical body, and 6 sharp arms. It could be said that even a venerable expert wouldn't be able to do anything to the King of Blood Demons in a short period of time. Moreover, venerable-level experts couldn't enter the Azura Blood Road. It was no wonder that no one had been able to obtain the inheritance of the strongest expert in the deepest part of the Azura Blood Road. As soon as the King of Blood Demons appeared, it emitted a monstrous blood aura and stared fiercely at the 7 people present. At this moment, even the heaven prides of overlord forces like Gu Xiaoyang, Yue and Waner were frowning, feeling very troubled. Princess Luoho and the others looked even more solemn. Everyone, I think that no matter what kind of grudges and hatred we have, the most important thing now is to deal with the King of Blood Demons. Otherwise, let alone fighting for the opportunity, we may even be killed by it, said Gu Xiaoyang. That's right. Princess Luoho agreed. She also wanted to know what the most precious opportunity in the depths of the Azura Blood Road was. Waner, what do you think? Gu Xiaoyang looked at Waner, not caring about Duguqioma. He didn't care about a person who hadn't even reached the divine dwelling stage, even if he was a demon emperor. Waner also thinks so. What do you think, Sister Songyue? Waner looked at Songyue with a smile. Songyue's face remained cold and indifferent. She frowned slightly, not happy to join forces with Waner and Duguqioma, but still nodded, because it wasn't the time to determine the winner between her and Waner. I think you won't refuse, right? Gu Xiaoyang looked at Yuan Hua and the others. Yuan Hua's face darkened. Gu Xiaoyang's tone was obviously arrogant and bossy. However, he was a heaven pride of the empire, and was weaker than the heaven prides of the overlord forces. Yuan Hua unwillingly glanced at Duguqioma, but still nodded in agreement, and temporarily suppressed his killing intent. The discussion seemed to take a long time, but in fact it only took a dozen breaths. The King of Blood Demons roared, and its 6 sharp arms pierced through the air towards the 7 people present. Everyone attacked together. Gu Xiaoyang shouted as if he had become the leader. With his status as one of the 10 great young masters, he indeed had the right to do so. Duguqioma did not care. He should deal with the Blood Demon King first. Soon after, a great battle broke out. Duguqioma and the others attacked at the same time. One had to admit that none of the geniuses who could stand out and fight their way into the blood-colored palace were weak. Yuan Hua waved his black gold halberd, sending halberd radiance into the sky. Princess Luoho slashed down with the scythe of the death god, and the scythe shone like a black moon. The demonic edge sword in Yi Songshan's hand vibrated and streaks of sword light shot out. On the other hand, Gu Xiaoyang was still calm as he held the Daoyuo star seal in his hand and crushed over. Songyue and Waner also used their own divine abilities. Neither of them wanted to be weaker than the other. Duguqioma also made his move, but he held back and did not use his full strength. The 7 Sky Prides were engaged in a chaotic battle with the King of the Blood Demons. Among them were 3 Sky Prides from Overlords and a mysterious Yi Songshan. Even though the Blood Demon King's force was close to the supremacy level, he could only contend with the 7 geniuses and could not kill them. This made the Blood Demon King furious, and his attacks became even fiercer. Everyone, if we continue to hold back, none of us will get that opportunity, Gu Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. Waner smiled and said, Mr. Gu, since you're so good at talking, why don't you set an example first? Okay. Gu Xiaoyang nodded without hesitation. Then he used his fingers as a sword and pointed in the air. 7 Stars Illusion, unsheath. As soon as he said that, a silver longsword shot out. The blade was like mercury and shone with 7 stars, forming the shape of the Big Dipper. This was Gu Xiaoyang's sword, the 7 Stars Illusion. However, the 7 Stars Illusion had already reached the level of a Tribulation Divine Weapon. Like the 9 Dragon Thunder Prison, it was a 10th Tribulation Divine Weapon. His sword has also transformed into a 10th Tribulation Divine Weapon. Duguqioma saw this. He remembered the battle between Gu Xiaoyang and Yi Guchen in the Tianhuang Plains. At that time, Gu Xiaoyang's 7 Stars Illusion was only a quasi-tribulation divine weapon. It seemed that during this time, Not only did Gu Xiaoyang's cultivation not lag behind, but even his sword had also transformed. Thousand Stars Pilgrimage Sword Technique. Gu Xiaoyang held the 7 stars manifest god and slashed out. Tens of thousands of sword lights emerged like a river of stars. Each sword light was extremely sharp and pierced towards the Blood Devil King like a meteor shower. Even Wanner had a serious look in her eyes. Gu Xiaoyang's strength was one of the best among the Overlord Force's Sky Prides. Otherwise he would not be ranked 9th on the Dragon Phoenix list. Seeing Gu Xiaoyang make a move, the others also began to use their own methods. Under such bombardment, even the tough shell on the Blood Demon King's body began to crack, and countless wounds appeared. Finally, with a roar, it exploded into countless pieces of blood foam. Just as the King of Blood Devils fell, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. The eyes of the 7 Sky Prides lit up, and they immediately charged toward the blood-colored gem. No one can stop me, young Master Xingyun. Gu Xiaoyang used the 1000 Stars Pilgrimage Sword Technique again. A turbulent sea of stars appeared, and countless sword chi spread out in all directions. You live up to your reputation as one of the top 10 young masters, but that's all you've got. Yi Zongshan smiled faintly, and his true chi surged into the demonic edge sword. He slashed out with his sword, and the sword shadow turned into a black stream of light that swept out. Sword shadow demonic flow. Kaboom! The void trembled, and sword rays shot out in all directions. This move actually ended in a draw. Who are you? Gu Xiaoyang's face darkened. Anyway, we're in the Sky Pride's battlefield, and we'll meet sooner or later. Why do I have to say it now? Yi Zongshan smiled faintly. You're from the dark world? Yi Zongyue frowned. Yi Zongshan laughed but did not say anything. Haha, I don't want to give up on this opportunity either. Wanner giggled and waved her hand. The most powerful martial technique of the extermination demonic sect, the Tuo Luo extermination light, appeared and swept forward. It could be said that after the Blood Demon King died, everyone began to use all their means to fight for the greatest opportunity in the Azura Bloody Road. Just as everyone was fighting intensely, the sound of a heartbeat came from the blood-colored gem again. The power of the heartbeat seemed to have resonated with the gem. Apart from Duguqioma, everyone's heart trembled, and they spat out a mouthful of blood. Their strength was greatly suppressed. How can this be? Gu Xiaoyang's face froze. Just the sound of a heartbeat was enough to make Sky Prides like them spit out blood. Just how powerful was that supreme expert? Just as everyone was shocked in their hearts, a figure charged towards the blood-colored gem with lightning speed. It was Duguqioma. Chapter 1185. Damn it! Seeing Duguqioma rush towards the blood-red gem, Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Zongshan, and Yuan He's faces darkened. The heartbeat from the blood-red gem had caught them off guard and injured them. Their strength was suppressed, and their speed was slowed down. However, they could not understand why Duguqioma was immune to the heartbeat. They did not know that Duguqioma did not have a real heart, so he would not be affected. In the end, this opportunity still belongs to me. Duguqioma's eyes shone brightly. Once he obtained this opportunity, he would be able to better help his original body, Yi Guchen, to deal with the upcoming battles. However, just as Duguqioma's hand was about to grab the blood-red gem, a sword tore through the air and stabbed towards Duguqioma's heart. Young Master Dugu, be careful. Wan'er's face under the veil paled slightly when she saw this. It was not because she was worried about Duguqioma. It was because Duguqioma was a demonic emperor phenomenon. If he died like this, it would be a great loss to the demonic extermination sect. Duguqioma turned his head, and saw that the person holding the sword was Yi Zongyue. A strange light appeared on Yi Zongyue's body like a full moon. It covered her body and made her look like a fairy from the Moon Palace. It made her look even more beautiful. Immortal divine fetus. Duguqioma immediately reacted. Why was Yi Zongyue immune to the heartbeat suppression? It was because the immortal divine fetus protected Yi Zongyue. At that moment, Yi Zongyue stabbed her sword towards Duguqioma's left chest. If Duguqioma continued to snatch the blood-red gem, his chest would undoubtedly be pierced through by the sword. If he gave up, it would be very difficult for Dugu and Qioma to fight for it after Gu Xiaoyang and the others recovered. Perhaps this is a choice of life and death to others, but it's nothing to me. Duguqiu laughed coldly. He ignored Yi Songyue's attack and grabbed the blood-red gem instead. At the same time, Yi Songyue's sword pierced through Duguqiu's chest. Idiot! Gu Xiaoyang sneered. In his opinion, disregarding one's life to fight for a fortuitous encounter was undoubtedly foolish to the extreme. No. Wanner cried out. It had not been easy for them to find a Demon Emperor phenomenon user, but he had fallen at Yi Songyue's hands just like that. With his heart pierced through. No one would think that Dugu would be able to survive. Heh. You call yourself a fairy, but your resolute methods aren't much worse than the witches. Duguqiu's lips curled into a cold smile. Yi Songyue was slightly surprised to see Duguqiu so calm despite knowing that he was going to die. You were born to bring blood and slaughter. Instead of becoming a demon your entire life, it's better to be free now. Yi Songyue said nonchalantly. Hee, what a good way to be free. Duguqiu shook his head. Then he suddenly realized that the blood-red gem in his hand was as fragile as glass. He crushed it with just a little force. Then, a blood-red vortex appeared and sucked Duguqiu and Yi Songyue into it. Then the vortex disappeared. What? What's going on, Fairy Songyue? Gu Xiaoyang was stunned and froze on the spot. Yi Songshan's face also darkened instantly. He finally understood that the blood-red gem was not a fortuitous encounter, but the key to it. Wanner, on the other hand, was in a daze. She had come here for nothing. Is he dead? Princess Luoxia muttered to herself. For some reason she should have been happy, but she did not feel any joy. She even felt that it was unreal. Had the white-haired sword demon, who had been invincible since his rise, really died just like that? It's good that he died. Unfortunately, he didn't die under my halberd, Yuan He said coldly. The people outside had different emotions. Duguqiu and Yi Songyue were in a strange blood-red space. In this space, there was nothing else but the Yellow Springs blood river that flowed in a meandering manner. At the end of the blood river, a bright red heart was beating loudly. The strange heartbeat from before came from this heart. Thump, thump. Every time the blood-red heart beat, it seemed to shake the void, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding space. Whose heart is that? Duguqiu's eyes were filled with doubt. You're not dead. Yi Songyue was shocked. Her sword was still in Duguqiu's chest. However, Duguqiu looked as if nothing had happened. There was not even a drop of blood. Yi Songyue, you want to kill me just because I triggered the Demon Emperor descending to the ninth heaven vision. Is this the justice you speak of? Duguqiu placed his hand on the blade of Yi Songyue's sword and pulled it out inch by inch. Although his chest had been pierced, only wisps of black gas were emitted. Your heart isn't on the left. Yi Songyue suddenly realized. Sorry, I'll kill those who want me, Duguqiu, to die first. Duguqiu's eyes sharpened. He used the battle god demon body and the heaven-devouring secret skill at the same time. He used the god-devouring sword and swept it toward Yi Songyue. Originally, Duguqiu was hesitant about whether he should maintain a good relationship with Yi Songyue, because she had the immortal divine embryo. This way, Yi Guchen's original body could obtain the innate indestructible sword embryo in the future. But now, Yi Songyue wanted to kill him completely. This touched Duguqiu's bottom line. No matter what, I'll suppress you first. Duguqiu used the Demon 13 swords, and a pitch-black sword light shot out. Yi Songyue also attacked, and her sword moves were swift and fierce. As a heaven's pride of the Misty Sword Pavilion, and a grade 8 heaven's pride, Yi Songyue's strength was unquestionable. At the moment, the two of them couldn't care less about the Yellow Springs blood river and the mysterious heart. When their moves collided, sparks flew and true chi shook. Your true strength isn't even at the divine dwelling stage, but you have such strength. You're indeed a demon emperor phenomenon. Yi Songyue was completely sure. So, you want to kill me to prevent me from being recruited by the destruction demon sect? Duguqiu sneered and continued to attack. If you didn't do evil, I wouldn't have done this. But you slaughtered 13 cities. Do you have any pity in your heart? Yi Songyue shouted coldly. Pity. Haha, so what if those overlord forces claim to be righteous? What about Gu Xiaoyang's character? Is he righteous? Duguqioma sneered. Justice had always been determined by the strong. Gu Xiaoyang was very strong, so everything he did was reasonable. Di Haoyan was very strong, so it was reasonable for him to destroy the Su family and forcefully suppress Su Jianshi. No one would say that Di Haoyan was a demon or an executioner. Moreover, although Duguqioma had slaughtered 13 cities, almost all of them were evil people. Duguqioma wasn't a madman who would kill anyone he saw. Duguqioma wouldn't kill innocent people. Yi Songyue had only seen one side, but she had already judged that Duguqioma was a demon king who couldn't be saved. No matter what, you'll only become a demon king if you're together with that witch. Yi Songyue shouted, and the power of the immortal divine embryo spread out again. The strange light instantly suppressed Duguqioma. Moreover, the light had the effect of restraining demonic qi, and Duguqioma felt as if he was imprisoned. Not good. Duguqioma raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect Yi Songyue's immortal divine embryo to be able to restrain demonic qi. Even the soul-devouring demon I was affected. At that very moment, Yi Songyue's sword stabbed forward again, piercing through Duguqioma's right chest and the longevity wood core. In an instant, Duguqioma's life essence plummeted. Chapter 1186. This time, Yi Songyue's sword pierced through the longevity wood core in Duguqioma's right chest. The longevity wood core was the source of Duguqioma's life essence. Without the longevity wood core, Duguqioma would lose his source of life. Duguqioma's face darkened. Ever since he was refined by Yi Guchen, he had been in a dangerous situation. This was the first time he had fallen into such a dangerous situation. I'm sorry, Duguqioma. The existence of a demon emperor phenomenon can only lead to endless slaughter and bloodshed. This may not be a bad ending for you. Yi Songyue's expression was cold. She did not look relaxed or happy. To her, this was just the completion of a mission. What a good ending. Unfortunately, Duguqioma, cannot be judged by just anyone. Not even you, Yi Songyue. Duguqioma clutched the wound in his right chest. Life essence leaked out continuously. Right now, there was only one way to survive, and that was the mysterious heart. Duguqioma's footsteps flashed as he turned around and charged toward the heart. Impossible. Yi Songyue moved gracefully and slashed down again, adding a new wound to Duguqioma's back. Duguqioma's body shook again. Black qi spread from his wound. His pure demon body showed signs of disintegration for the first time. This woman's immortal divine embryo is so powerful. It can perfectly restrain my demon body. Duguqioma's expression was cold. The immortal divine embryo's power seemed to be the most perfect, pure, and flawless power in the world. Demon qi happened to be the opposite of this power. Yi Songyue's cultivation was higher than Duguqioma's. Therefore, his pure demon body was completely restrained by the immortal divine embryo, as expected of the innate ability of a rank 8 prodigy. However, it's too easy for you to kill me, Duguqioma. Duguqioma's tenacity was not inferior to Yi Guchen's. Devil qi leaked out of his body, but he still stubbornly charged towards the mysterious heart. I'm sorry, but your path ends here. Yi Songyue raised her sword. She used the Misty Sword Pavilion's ancestral sword art, the Misty Sword Art. The sword swept out, and the sword light spread out like a waterfall, sweeping towards Duguqiomo. Duguqioma's face changed. Just as he was about to go all out, a hoarse voice with a hint of coldness suddenly sounded. I can feel it. It's a move that makes me feel somewhat disgusted. This voice echoed throughout the blood-colored space. Then, a beam of bloody light shot out from the Yellow Springs Blood River, and cancelled out Yi Songyue's sword light. Who is it? Yi Songyue was on guard. Dugu and Xiaoemo also looked around. A towering figure appeared above the mysterious heart. That figure was a middle-aged man wearing blood-colored Azura armor. His hands were behind his back, and there seemed to be a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood behind him. The Yellow Springs Blood River circled around him, giving him the aura of a ruler of hell. You are, Yi Songyue, and Duguqioma's eyes froze. Azura Saint King. The 4 words seemed to be able to suppress thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. A Saint King expert. Yi Songyue and Duguqioma's faces changed. A Saint King of a domain could shake mountains and rivers, and suppressed the sun, moon and stars. Even in the Nantian region, they were experts at the top of the pyramid. Even someone as strong as the proud divine regent could kill 3 saints in a row at the half-step Saint King realm, shocking the world. One could only imagine how powerful a true Saint King would be. So the inheritance of the supreme expert in the deepest part of the Azura blood road refers to this Azura Saint King, Duguchioma muttered to himself. At the same time, he also understood the origin of the Azura blood. It was the mysterious heart, the heart of the Azura Saint King. The heart of a Saint King expert had boundless energy. It was no wonder that Gu Xiaoyang and the others vomited blood, and were injured when they heard the heartbeat. However, although Yi Tsungyue and Duguchioma were slightly surprised, they did not panic. This was because they could feel that the Azura Saint King before them was only a consciousness clone, and he did not have the power of a Saint King. The Misty Sword technique of the Misty Sword Pavilion is still so annoying. The Azura Saint King's eyes flashed coldly, as if he had recalled some unpleasant memories. Seeing this, Yi Tsungyue's face changed. Senior, do you have some grudges with the Misty Sword Pavilion? Ah, that old witch Jiamei is still alive, right? The Azura Saint King sneered. What? Yi Tsungyue's face changed. Jiamei was the previous pavilion master of the Misty Sword Pavilion. Her seniority and strength were frighteningly high. This Azura Saint King was actually someone from the same generation as Jiamei? This shocked Yi Tsungyue. On the other side, Duguchioma's eyes flashed as he said, Senior, if you have a grudge with the Misty Sword Pavilion, can you help this junior? This junior agrees to help senior deal with the Misty Sword Pavilion. Duguchioma did not want to die. He had to live. And this mysterious Azura Saint King's grudges with the Misty Sword Pavilion was the best place to start. Yi Tsungyue gritted her teeth. She did not expect Duguchioma to take advantage of this loophole. You're a little interesting. The Azura Saint King turned to look at Duguchioma. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Obviously, he also saw the uniqueness of Duguchioma's physique. Interesting. Is this the will of the heavens? It seems like the only person who can inherit my heart is you, said the Azura Saint King. When he was about to die, he accidentally came to the Mola dynasty and opened up the Azura Bloody Road. It was all to find his successor. However, after a long time, there was still no one who was qualified to inherit his legacy. And Duguchioma was the most suitable candidate to inherit the Azura Saint King's legacy. What? Yi Tsungyue's eyes changed. If the Azura Saint King helped Duguchioma, the situation would not be good. Kid, I'm from the Dark World. In the future, you must help the Dark World rise up, said the Azura Saint King. The Dark World again. Duguchioma said in his heart. Shui Yiqing from the Bloodthirst Tower brought Shui heir to the Dark World. The Demon Sword Emperor, Jitian, was also an expert from the Dark World. He had once killed countless people in the Nantian region. Yi Tsongshan, who was ranked first on the blood ranking, also came from the Dark World. And now the Azura Saint King also came from the Dark World. What kind of existence was the Dark World? What did it have to do with the Nantian region? But now Duguchioma did not think too much. He could only agree. Seeing this, the Azura Saint King waved his hand. The beating heart turned into a blood-red stream of light and entered Duguchioma's body, replacing the broken longevity wood core. In an instant, Duguchioma felt a terrifying blood energy spread out, as if it was going to burst his pure demon body. Seeing this, the Azura Saint King pointed with his finger. Seal. The boundless power in the heart was immediately sealed by more than half. On the other side, Yi Tsungyue could only watch and could not interfere. She did not expect the situation to turn out this way. However, just as Duguchioma's body began to merge with the heart, the Azura Saint King's gaze fell on Yi Tsungyue, with an inexplicable meaning. Yi Tsungyue suddenly felt a sense of danger. Ha! With my identity, I won't do anything to a junior like you. However, the special power in your body can better allow that kid to merge with my heart. So, the Azura Saint King smiled faintly. Yi Tsungyue's expression froze. Chapter 1187. How could she not understand the meaning behind the Azura Sage King's words? The power of the immortal divine embryo that she possessed was very helpful for Duguchioma to fuse with the Sage King's heart. Therefore, the Azura Sage King wanted to use a certain method to let Duguchioma be imbued with this power. As for what method it was, Itsangyue did not dare to think about it. Senior, you're a Sage King expert. Are you going to make things difficult for a weak girl? Itsangyue's body tensed up as she bit her lips with a serious expression. Haha, there are no weak girls in the Misty Sword Pavilion. Moreover, you almost killed this brat just now. This is considered compensation. The Azura Sage King raised his hand as he spoke. A ball of blood spurted out from the yellow spring blood river and condensed into a blood-red ribbon that bound Itsangyue. Even though the Azura Sage King had already fallen, he was not someone that Itsangyue could resist. Soon, Itsangyue was bound like a prey that fell into a spider's web. Senior, this. Duguchioma's eyes flashed as he did not understand what the Azura Sage King was trying to do. A gentleman has the beauty to fulfill someone's wish. Although I'm not a gentleman, it's not bad to have a beautiful marriage after my death. The Azura Sage King smiled faintly. What? Itsangyue's mind shook violently, and her face that was as cold as frost became as pale as paper. She understood the meaning behind the Azura Sage King's words. He wanted to use a special method to make her and Duguchioma fuse together. Itsangyue's usually cold and beautiful face was in a mess as her heart was in turmoil. Duguchioma did not say anything as he was trying his best to fuse with the Azura Sage King's heart. However, he had heard the Azura Sage King's words. Ah, Itsangyue, it seems like there's still some karma between us, Duguchioma muttered. The innate sword embryo and the immortal divine embryo had some kind of karmic connection after all. Although it was not Iguchin's true body, Duguchioma was no different from Iguchin. They shared a consciousness and soul. In the future, they would have the ability to fuse together and transform into their strongest form. Therefore, the union between Itsangyue and Dugu was, in a way, a union with Iguchin. No. How could this be? Itsangyue's genuine chi burst forth, and the power of the immortal divine embryo was pushed to the extreme. She wanted to break free from the blood-colored ribbon, but it was in vain. It's best if you don't put up any unnecessary resistance. The Azura Saint King smiled faintly. Even though she was only left with a subconscious clone, a sacred king was still a sacred king. Itsangyue was still powerless to resist. Then the Azura Saint King sent 2 balls of blood-red light into Itsangyue and Duguchioma's bodies. Instantly, Itsangyue felt her entire body heat up, and her snow-white skin was flushed red. Her eyes, which were originally as cold as the moon, gradually became a little dazed. However, she still gritted her teeth and persevered, as expected of a disciple of the Misty Sword Pavilion. The Azura Saint King shook his head and snapped his fingers. A mysterious force seemed to be boiling in Itsangyue's delicate body, causing her to be dazzled. She flew straight towards Duguchioma. A pair of slender snow-white arms wrapped around Duguchioma's neck. Although Duguchioma was also hit by the Azura Saint King's blood-red light, his perverted willpower was so strong that it did not affect him too much. Looking at Itsangyue, who was chasing after him and piercing through his chest, at this moment, she was like a thirsty woman, yearning for him. Duguchioma could not help but sigh. Every dog has its day. Seeing that Duguchioma did not do anything, the Azura Saint King raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Why? Don't tell me that you want to be a gentleman. Wouldn't that be too boring?" The Azura Saint King did not like hypocrites and moralists. Duguchioma smiled and said, "Senior, you've misunderstood. In this woman's eyes, I, Duguchioma, am already an unpardonable villain. If that's the case, why should I be an unperturbed Lu Xiaohui?" Duguchioma's lips curled into a sinister sneer. If it was Yi Guchen himself, he might still be able to uphold the etiquette of a gentleman. However, Duguchioma was the other side of Yi Guchen. He was the incarnation of a demon. As a demon, if he were to be timid and overcautious, he would not have the demeanor of a demon. Since Itsangyue believed that Duguchioma was destined to become an unparalleled demon king, then Duguchioma might as well become an unparalleled demon king. Haha, you've inherited my Saint King's heart. Don't disappoint me. The Azura Saint King waved his hand, and blood-red light surged from the Yellow Springs blood river, turning into a blood-red ball of light that enveloped Yi Tsungyue and Duguqioma. Within the blood-red ball of light, Yi Tsungyue was delirious, but she still retained a trace of her consciousness. A teardrop fell from her misty eyes. It contrasted with the mole at the corner of her left eye, adding a touch of poignant beauty. Duguqioma, if you really harm my body, I, Yi Tsungyue, will never let you off. Yi Tsungyue sobbed. She was the ethereal sword pavilion's fairy Tsungyue, an immortal. Duguqioma was a demon that attracted the demon emperor to the 9 heavens. Immortals and demons were destined to be enemies, just like her and Witch Wan-er. However, Yi Tsungyue did not expect Wan-er to be right. The immortal and the demon king were about to be together. Haha. Don't worry. I, Duguqioma, will accompany you to the end. Duguqioma laughed heartily. He would accompany you to the end. That was Duguqioma's promise. Yi Tsungyue's last trace of consciousness was completely lost. The two of them hugged each other. Outside, the Azura Sage King muttered to himself. This kid is really mysterious. Even I can't see through him. Is he the turning point of the dark world? The 3 hidden forces and the various overlords, just you wait. The dark world's counterattack is coming. The Azura Sage King's eyes were cold. Time passed. After an unknown period of time, the blood-red ball of light dissipated, revealing 2 figures. Duguqioma was dressed in black. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his vitality was as vigorous as a dragon's. As for Yi Tsungyue, she was exhausted and had fainted. Duguqioma helped her put on a moon-white robe. How is it? Are you satisfied with this opportunity? The Azura Sage King smiled. Thank you, Senior. Duguqioma cupped his fists. The heart of the Sage King had completely replaced the longevity wood core, and became Duguqioma's heart. Because of the heart of the Azura Sage King, his body had completely turned into a body of flesh and blood. He could bleed and was no longer like before, where he only emitted black gas. At the same time, Duguqioma's battle god demonic body had also reached the 3rd refinement stage. His cultivation base had also broken through to the 3rd firmament of the divine dwelling realm by relying on the heart of the Sage King and the power of Yi Tsungyue's immortal divine embryo. Moreover, his divine dwelling was no ordinary divine dwelling. It was blood-red. The blood-red divine dwelling was called the Azura divine dwelling, and it was also a flawless divine dwelling. It also had the ability to turn ordinary true chi into blood-red Azura true chi. The blood-red Azura true chi was more lethal than ordinary true chi. It could be said that the heart of the Azura Sage King had caused a qualitative change in Duguqioma's strength. But that was not all. The Azura Sage King had left a great opportunity here, and he wanted to pass it on to Duguqioma. Chapter 1188. Not bad. Looks like you've perfectly fused with my heart. However, there's another opportunity here that's even more valuable than my heart, said the Azura Saint King. The greatest opportunity. Duguqioma was slightly stunned as he stared at the yellow spring blood river. Could it be? That's right. It's this yellow spring blood river. Do you know what this yellow spring blood river is? Asked the Azura Saint King. I don't know, Duguqioma said honestly. The Saint King realm was too far away from him. Duguqioma could not understand the Azura Saint King's methods. The Azura Saint King was not surprised. There are 9 levels of Heaven's Tribulation. The 1st to 3rd levels are Heaven's Tribulation Saints, while the 4th and 6th levels are Realm Saint Kings. I'm a 4th level Saint King, but do you know the difference between a saint and a Saint King? Duguqioma shook his head. So far, whether it was him or Yi Guchen, the strongest person they had met was the half-step Saint King of the Proud Divine Continent. The Proud Divine Continent was still half a step away from the Saint King realm. So Duguqioma did not know the secret of the Saint King. The Azura Saint King continued. Saint Kings are also known as Realm Saint Kings. The biggest difference between them and a saint is that they can condense a realm and use the realm's power to suppress everything. Realm's power? Duguqioma raised his eyebrows. Next, the Azura Saint King gave a general explanation. If Heaven's Tribulation Saints comprehended the power of laws, then Realm's Saint Kings condensed the realm's power. When the Soul Palace and spiritual abode reached the peak, They would be refined and fused by the heavens' tribulation, and the two powers would become one. At this time, the combination of the spiritual abode and soul palace would create a special domain called a realm. Powerhouses who comprehended different nomological powers would condense different bounded domains. For example, the Azura Saint King's realm was called the Yellow Spring Blood River, which was the blood-red river that Duguqioma saw. It could be said that the Yellow Spring Blood River was the Azura Saint King's greatest legacy. I see. In that case, there are some similarities between the realm domain and the sword Dao domain, Dugu asked. It is indeed similar, but there is still a fundamental difference between the two. The sword way domain can only be expanded with the way of the sword, while any Saint King expert has their own domain, said the Azura Saint King. Duguqioma nodded. If that was the case, then the value of the Yellow Springs Blood River was indeed immeasurable. Now he finally understood why Yi Tsongshan had been so eager to obtain the legacy. Clearly Yi Tsongshan and the Azura Saint King both came from the Dark World. It was understandable that he wanted the Azura Saint King's inheritance. If you've decided, I'll condense this realm and hand it over to you, the Azura Sage King said. But I don't want to walk the path of my predecessors. Dugu hesitated. If he inherited the Azura Saint King's bounded domain, would he be able to condense his own bounded domain when he became a Saint King in the future? Oh, are you going to reject me? The Azura Saint King narrowed his eyes. A terrifying pressure poured down on Duguqioma. One could imagine the pressure of a Saint King expert. Even if it was just a consciousness clone, it was definitely not something that a divine-dwelling expert could contend against. But Duguqioma's expression did not change. He said in a deep voice, "If Senior's Yellow Springs Blood River blocks my path, then I won't accept it." He looked at the young man who was still calm and composed under his pressure. The Azura Saint King was taken aback at first, but then he suddenly laughed. The pressure also dissipated into nothingness. "Haha, I didn't misjudge you. Don't worry, the Yellow Springs Blood River won't affect your path in the future," said the Azura Saint King. "Thank you, Senior," Duguqioma said. The Azura Saint King raised his hand. In the blood-red space, the entire Yellow Springs Blood River suddenly surged. It then shrank and condensed into a ball of viscous liquid the size of a fist. It directly entered Duguqioma's dantian. The Yellow Springs Blood River had various means of sealing, suppressing, refining, and attacking. This was the strongest manifestation of the Azura Sage King's law power. With Duguqioma's current realm, it was difficult for him to unleash even 1% of the Yellow Springs Blood River's power. But even so, the Yellow Springs Blood River was enough to be Dugu's trump card. "Since you have inherited my legacy, you are my successor. If you have the chance in the future, you can go to the Azura domain in the Dark World. Keep this Azura Lord token." As the Azura Sage King spoke, he took out a blood-colored token. Dugu begged the demon to accept it. He didn't know where the world of darkness was, nor did he know where the Azura territory was. However, it wouldn't be too late to consider such matters in the future. Alright, this matter is concluded. Now the entire Azura Blood Road will no longer exist. You can all leave. The Azura Saint King waved his hand. Now that he had found a successor, one of his wishes had been fulfilled. After that, the Azura Saint King's consciousness clone faded into the void. "Thank you, Senior." Dugu cupped his hands slightly. This trip to the Azura Blood Road could be said to be a fruitful one. Although the longevity wood core was broken, he had obtained an even more powerful heart of the Saint King. It had also transformed his pure demon body into a real body of flesh and blood. Of course, he was immune to most poisons and pain, and other abilities. My original body has the ancient god's heart, and I have the Azura Saint King's heart. Interesting. Duguqioma chuckled. However, his gains were not only that. His cultivation had directly broken through to the third heaven of the divine dwelling realm. His battle god demon body had also broken through to the third revolution. The divine dwelling was also a flawless blood-colored Azura divine dwelling that could condense Azura true chi. More importantly, he had obtained the Azura Saint King's realm, and the inheritance of the Yellow Springs Blood River. Of course, Duguqioma didn't forget that the most important things he had obtained weren't these. Duguqioma turned his gaze to Yi Tsangyue. who was still unconscious. Even in a coma, Yi Songyue's face was so beautiful that it was soul-stirring. Her face, which was originally as cold as frost, was now flushed red. There seemed to be a few drops of tears hanging from her long eyelashes, which set off the mole at the corner of her eye. It made Yi Songyue look even more delicate and delicate. Dugu Qiuma indifferently walked forward, his indifferent eyes containing a wisp of extremely complicated emotions. He didn't have too many feelings. This was because he had inherited Yi Guqin's heavenly fiend fate. Therefore he was destined to be lonely. It was because of this that Dugu Qiuma had told Qingqing not to have any feelings for him. In the end, she would only feel sad. However, Dugu Qiuma didn't expect that he would develop such an ill-fated relationship with Yi Songyue. Just as Dugu Qiuma was sighing inwardly, Yi Songyue suddenly opened her cold moon-like eyes, which were filled with shame, despair, and resentment. Die. Yi Songyue suddenly lunged forward, thrusting her sword towards Dugu Qiuma's heart. Just as the tip of her sword was about to pierce through, Dugu Qiuma stretched out his hand and grabbed the tip of Yi Songyue's sword. You. Yi Songyue's expression changed. Do you think that I will just stand there and let you stab me to make up for the guilt in my heart? Sorry, Dugu Qiuma, I'm not that kind of person. Chapter 1189. Dugu's tone was as cold as ice. Yi Songyue's expression changed. Previously, Yi Guqin had willingly allowed Situ Hongxue to stab him in the heart in order to make up for the guilt in his heart. But Dugu Qiuma was not that kind of person. He would not sacrifice his own interests for a mere woman, even if this woman was extremely beautiful and had the reputation of a fairy. Dugu Qiuma. Yi Songyue gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. The pain coming from her lower body made her feel as if it was unreal. Her virginity had been taken away by the white-haired sword demon in front of her. One should know that Yi Songyue was an 8th-grade prodigy of the Misty Sword Pavilion, and in existence on the Dragon Phoenix list. It was one thing for her to be strong, but the key point was that she was equally beautiful. She was known as Fairy Songyue in the Nantian region. The number of young geniuses pursuing Yi Songyue was as numerous as the carps in the river. But Yi Songyue was cold and arrogant. She was focused on cultivation and did not speak to the opposite sex. Even an outstanding prodigy like Gu Xiaoyang could not win Yi Songyue's heart even after pursuing her for a long time. And now, Yi Songyue's virginity had been taken away by Dugu Qiuma. Yi Songyue could not accept this at all. Boom. Yi Songyue released the aura of the 6th level of the Divine Dwelling Realm and activated the power of the immortal divine embryo. Suddenly, a round and flawless brilliance appeared and suppressed Dugu Qiuma. Previously, Yi Songyue had used the power of the immortal divine embryo to force Dugu Qiuma into a desperate situation. But now, Dugu Qiuma released the power of the 3rd level of the Divine Dwelling Realm. Together with the blood-colored Azura Divine Dwelling, he was no weaker than Yi Songyue. Moreover, his heart was the heart of the Azura Sage King. Even if the Sage King's heart had most of its power sealed, it was enough to provide Dugu Qiuma with powerful energy. Dugu Qiuma smiled and said, Yi Songyue, things are different now. Even if you activate the power of the immortal divine embryo, you will not be able to suppress me. His cultivation level had skyrocketed, and his pure demonic body had also transformed. Naturally, he would not be restrained by the immortal divine embryo like before. Just as the two of them were fighting endlessly, the entire blood-red space began to tremble and crack. This place is about to collapse. Dugu pleaded. Not only this space, but the entire Azura Blood Road would soon collapse. Dugu, Yi Songyue, have said that I will never let you off. Yi Songyue bit her lips so hard that they almost broke. Ah, to have such a beautiful fairy follow me for all eternity. Dugu, am not qualified to beg the devil. Dugu smiled, not minding it at all. A blood-red vortex appeared beside them and swallowed them up. At the same time in the Scarlet Palace, Yi Songshan, Gu Xiaoyang, and the others all had ugly expressions. They knew that the blood-red gem was the key to the true opportunity. However, he missed them by a wide margin. In addition, Gu Xiaoyang was worried about Yi Songyue's condition. Although he had seen Yi Songyue's sword pierce through Dugachyoma's chest, he was still shocked. But for some reason, Gu Xiaoyang felt restless and uneasy. Princess Luo Ho, on the other hand, had an indescribable feeling. She should have felt relieved that Dugachyoma was dead. However, that was not the case in reality. Yuan Ho was the only one who felt relieved. On the other hand, the witch was the opposite. Her face, which was covered by a black veil, was extremely cold and resentful. I've worked so hard for so long, but it's all in vain. Wan'er gritted her teeth angrily. She had spent so much time tracking the demon emperor phenomenon to the Mola dynasty. She had finally found Dugachyoma after much difficulty, but he had died in the end. One could only imagine how furious Wan'er was. However, at that moment the entire Scarlet Palace suddenly shook. What's going on? The 5 people present were slightly shocked. Then the void distorted, and a blood-red vortex appeared. 2 figures flashed out from the front and back. When Wan'er saw the 2 figures clearly, she covered her mouth and exclaimed in disbelief, "Dugachyoma, you're still alive?" The figure in front was Dugachyoma. How is that possible? Yuan Ho was also shocked. They had seen Yi Songyue's sword pierce through Dugacyoma's chest with their own eyes. Logically speaking, Dugachyoma should not have survived. Princess Luo Ho was also surprised, but she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Princess Luo Ho was surprised by her own emotions. On the other side, Yi Songyue stared at Dugachyoma with her clear eyes. Her hand that was holding the sword was trembling slightly. However, she did not say anything. "Fairy Songyue, are you all right?" Gu Xiaoyang went forward and asked with concern. When Dugachyoma saw this, he said indifferently, "She's all right. She's just bleeding a little." "What? You dared to hurt Fairy Songyue?" Gu Xiaoyang's face immediately darkened. However, when Yi Songyue heard this, she was even more ashamed and angry. How could she not understand the meaning behind Dugacyoma's words? When Dugachyoma saw this, he shook his head lightly. If Gu Xiaoyang knew the cruel truth, how would he react? Although Dugachyoma did not have the confidence to kill Gu Xiaoyang, but he had defeated him in another aspect. By the way, I still need to find someone to spar with and measure my strength after the transformation, Dugachyoma thought. At this moment, a vigorous killing intent swept out again. It was Yuan Hua. "Dugachyoma, you're really lucky. But this is also good. Killing you with my halberd will be the best revenge." Yuan Hua's voice was cold. His black hair fluttered in the wind as he held the black gold halberd in his hand. He originally regretted not being able to kill Dugachyoma with his own hands. But now he finally had the opportunity. Since Yuan Hua wanted to die, Dugachyoma could only fulfill his wish. Kill. Yuan Hua erupted with the true chi of the 4th layer of the divine dwelling stage. The black gold halberd violently swept toward Dugachyoma. "I'm not the same as before," Dugachyoma muttered to himself. Facing Yuan Hua, Dugachyoma didn't even need to use the sky-devouring secret technique. He activated the blood-red Azura divine dwelling in his dantian, and blood-red true chi gushed out like a volcanic eruption. Blood chi filled the sky and shook the void. Although he was only at the 3rd layer of the divine dwelling stage, the aura that erupted was no weaker than Yuan Hua's. "How is it possible? Your cultivation level." The moment Dugacyoma's aura erupted, the expressions of several people, including Yuan Hua, changed. This time around, Dugachyoma was not using a secret technique. Instead, he was truly using his own power. But Yuan Hua couldn't believe that Dugachyoma could break through the divine dwelling stage in such a short time, and even soar to the 3rd layer of the divine dwelling stage. He must have obtained the inheritance of that supreme expert. Yi Songshan's eyes suddenly turned fierce. Now, facing Yuan Hua's attack, Dugacyoma's expression was indifferent. "The 3rd place on the blood ranking is nothing to me now." Dugachyoma raised his hand and swung out the god-devouring sword. Blood-red Azura true chi poured into it. 100 feet long blood-red sword light slashed down like an Azura sword god, breaking the abyss with one sword. Chapter 1190. Dugacyoma's strength had skyrocketed after he received the Azura Saint King's inheritance. His cultivation base was at the 3rd level of the divine dwelling, and he had a flawless Azura divine dwelling. Duguqioma could contend against Yuanhua without using the sky-devouring secret technique or other amplification techniques. Rumble! 100-foot-long blood-red sword light came crashing down like a blood moon. Yuanhua brandished his black-gold halberd and raised it horizontally. When the weapons collided, it was as if stars had exploded, bursting out violent blasts and sparks. The entire blood-red palace trembled violently, and cracks appeared in the void. The Azura blood path is about to collapse. Gu Xiaoyang and the others were startled. But they couldn't continue to stay here, so they could only temporarily withdraw from the blood-red palace. Yi Songyue glanced at Duguqioma, gritted her teeth, and also flashed out. I'll find out more about the opportunity from him later. Yi Songshan pondered for a moment, then also turned and left the blood-red palace. Duguqioma, do you need Waner to help you? Waner's eyes flashed. There's no need. You go out first and wait for me outside, Duguqioma said. Princess Luoho hesitated for a moment, staring at Duguqioma with her beautiful eyes under the mask. She bit her lips and said coldly, Duguqioma, I haven't settled the score between you and me. You can't die before that. Heh. Duguqioma chuckled and didn't say anything. In the blink of an eye, only Yuanhua and Duguqioma were left in the trembling blood-red palace. Duguqioma, what opportunity did you obtain? Yuanhua fixed his gaze on Duguqioma. He had fought with Duguqioma before, and although he didn't gain any advantage, he didn't feel that Duguqioma was strong. But now Duguqioma seemed to have been reborn after coming out of that space, and his strength had soared several times. I will tell you, but only when you are about to die. Duguqioma laughed coldly. Arrogant. Yuanhua's face was extremely cold. His black hair danced wildly as his genuine qi surged. As the strongest heaven's pride of Mystic Demon Palace, and ranked third on the blood ranking, he had never been looked down upon like this. Heavenly Wasteland / Yuanhua held the black gold halberd with both hands, and infused it with vigorous genuine qi. His halberd slashed down vertically, as if it could split the sky. Duguqioma performed the Demon 13 swords again. The blood-colored sword rays crisscrossed and swept in all directions, forming a dense sword net that clashed with Yuanhua's move. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous explosions rang out as the two of them collided with each other like meteors. Yuanhua held the halberd in one hand and slashed down again. His other hand formed a seal, and a black seal froze in the void. Then it pushed toward Dugu. Yuan devouring explosion. Duguqioma reached out with one hand. Black demonic light exploded in the void, shattering the seal. At the same time, the God Devourer sword blocked the attack of the black gold halberd. More cracks appeared on the blade of the black gold halberd. How could this be? Yuanhua's eyes darkened again. Although his black gold halberd was a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon, its material was extremely heavy and hard. Its sturdiness was comparable to a true heavenly tribulation divine weapon. However, he would never know that Duguqioma's God Devourer sword was a primordial demonic sword. At this moment, Duguqioma activated the soul-devouring demonic eye again. A terrifying soul vibration power entered Yuanhua's sea of consciousness. Although Yuanhua's sea of consciousness wasn't weak, it was still affected. His soul force was affected, as if it was about to boil. Cough. Yuanhua snorted, feeling as if his head was about to explode. However, his willpower was still extraordinary. His sea of consciousness was also far stronger than ordinary heaven's prides, so he wouldn't be killed instantly. Duguqioma took this opportunity to perform another ultimate move. Great God Devouring Art. The power of devouring exploded, forming a black hole vortex above Duguqioma as if it wanted to devour everything. The Great God Devouring Art was also a martial art of the Soul Devourer clan, so its power was needless to say. After Duguqioma's cultivation base improved, the power of the Great God Devouring Art also doubled. Many items in the collapsing blood-red palace were swallowed by the black hole and turned into dust. Even Yuanhua couldn't control his body and was about to be sucked in. Demonic God Splitting Slash. Yuanhua's true qi burst forth as he hurriedly performed his ultimate move. Phantoms of demonic gods appeared around him, and it was as if the god of war of the underworld had attacked. A terrifying aura surged out as if it wanted to destroy everything. The black gold halberd in his hand swept across the sky, accompanied by phantoms of demonic gods, and slashed at the black hole vortex formed by the great god-devouring art. Boom! A violent explosion reverberated in all directions, and powerful ripples of air directly overturned the roof of the blood-red palace. Yi Songyue, Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Songshan, Wan and Princess Luo Ho, who had left the blood-red palace, looked back with a trace of surprise. They didn't expect the shockwaves from the two's battle to be so intense. In the center of the battle, Yuan Hu kept retreating, coughing blood from the corner of his mouth, and his black gold armor was shattered in many places. As for Duguqiumo's, although he was also injured, it didn't hurt him at all. This was because Duguqiumo's had the Saint King's heart. What was contained within was the Azura blood that was filled with vitality and vitality. Therefore, as long as he wasn't fatally injured, beheaded, or destroyed, Duguqiumo's wouldn't die. Damn it. Yuan Hu's face was ferocious and unwilling. He didn't expect the white-haired sword demon, who he didn't take seriously before, to grow to a level that even he couldn't deal with. Final move, Blood Tears of Heaven. Yuan Hu patted his chest with one hand, and his heart's essence blood spurted onto the black gold halberd, causing the halberd's blade to be covered in a mournful bloody light. He swept out with the halberd, stirring up the surrounding space with a bloody chi wave. At the same time, Yuan Hu's other arm turned as black as ink almost instantly. It was Mystic Demon Palace's Emperor-level martial art, Black Sky Demon Hand. Yuan Hu performed the two ultimate moves at the same time, and their power was so overwhelming that the surrounding Azura blood sea started to surge violently. Seeing this, Duguqiumo's continued to perform the Demon 13 Swords. First move, Blood Kill. Second move, Vanishing Shadow. Third move, Burning Star. Fourth move, Moon Slashing. Fifth move, Eclipse. 5 swords were performed consecutively, and the sword light caused chaos in the world, collapsing the universe. But it wasn't over yet. Duguqiumo's performed the 6th move again. Devour Dusk. The sword light swept out, as if it could swallow the setting sun. Powerful sword chi swept out in all directions, causing the already unstable space of the Azura blood path to collapse. Boom! Indescribable shockwaves were produced, as if a nuclear bomb had exploded, and thick smoke rose. The violent shockwaves swept across the surrounding blood sea like a gale. Yi Songyue, Wan Gu Xiaoyang and the others who had left the blood-colored palace, all turned their heads to watch, wanting to know the result. Chapter 1191. The Azura blood sea exploded, creating huge waves. After the Azura Saint King's consciousness dissipated, the blood demons also melted into the blood sea. Walala! The blood that had soared into the sky fell back into the blood sea, creating a dense blood-colored mist. The sound of coughing blood came from the bloody mist. Yuan Hu retreated hundreds of meters, his black and gold armor cracked and shattered. His body was covered with sword wounds, and blood flowed freely. He was in a sorry state. His eyes were bloodshot, and his chin was dripping with blood. He stared at the figure in front of him. Duguqiumo's figure appeared. His clothes were torn, especially his shoulder, which had been scratched by the black and gold halberd. His white bones could be seen clearly. However, Duguqiumo did not seem to feel any pain. He looked at Yuan Hu indifferently. No. I can't accept this. Again. Yuan Hu roared. All the blood vessels in his body exploded, and his chi and blood burned. Final move, Reverse Heaven and Earth. Yuan Hu tried his best to make a last stand. It's just a futile effort. Before Yuan Hu's halberd could strike, Duguqiumo rushed to Yuan Hu's side and said coldly, "What I have is the Sage King's inheritance." Duguqiumo's cold murmur fell into Yuan Hu's ears. His face froze, and his eyes slowly widened. The Sage King's inheritance. This was definitely an opportunity that Yuan Hu could not imagine. The will to fight to the death that he had gathered was instantly extinguished. Puchi. Just as Yuan Hu was about to give up, the God Devourer sword pierced through his chest. A terrifying devouring power erupted, instantly absorbing and refining Yuan Hu's chi and blood. The wounds on Duguqiumo's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not far away, It Songyue and the other four saw this scene and felt a chill in their hearts. Duguchyoma's method was indeed a real demon. No, he was more like a demon than a demon. It's such a waste for him not to join destruction. Oneer commented. After killing Yuan Hua, Dugu's score for Chiuemo had undoubtedly reached the top of the leaderboard. However, Duguchioma didn't plunder Yuan Hua's Azura blood, because he already had the heart of the Azura Sage King. With this heart, he would have an endless supply of Azura blood. This was because the source of the Azura blood in the Moro dynasty was the heart of the Azura Saint King. Moreover, the Azura blood had been diluted many times over. Duguchioma could already foresee what kind of monstrous waves would be stirred up in the outside world. After all, the two geniuses of Mystic Demon Palace had died at his hands. After killing Yuan Hua, Duguchioma also stepped through the Blood Sea to come here. He knew that things weren't over yet. Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Songshan, and the others were still eyeing him covetously. TSK. Duguchioma Waner is curious about your fortuitous encounter. I asked Sister Tsongyue, but she refused to tell me. Waner smiled when she saw Duguchioma arrive. It Songyue's expression was a little unnatural as a layer of frost covered her face. Gu Xiaoyang also noticed that something was wrong with It Songyue. However, his main focus was still on Duguchioma's fortuitous encounter. Enough chit-chat. Hand over your fortuitous encounter. It Songshan said coldly. He was straightforward. He came from the Dark World, and was the young master of a huge force in the Dark World. He had found records about the Azura Sage King in an ancient book, which was why he came to the Moro dynasty to search. He finally confirmed that the inheritance might be in the depths of the Azura Blood Road. After searching for so long, how could Yi Songshan be willing to hand over the fortuitous encounter to someone else? Gu Xiaoyang also said coldly, hand over the fortuitous encounter. It's not something you can have. Gu Xiaoyang's attitude was cold and condescending. He was like an immortal overlooking an ant in the mortal world. Duguchioma's expression was extremely cold. Back then, Gu Xiaoyang had taken away Yi Guchen's Khanate sword embryo with such a condescending attitude. Later on in the Tianhuang Plains, he had also planted the soul spirit devouring parasite in Yi Guchen's Dantian with such a condescending attitude. Now he still had such a condescending attitude. It was because he came from an overlord force that he could look down on Gu Xiaoyang. Gu Xiaoyang, actually, there's something I've always wanted to say to you. Duguchioma's lips curled into a cold arc as he tilted his head slightly. What? Gu Xiaoyang frowned slightly. Who do you think you are? Waner and the others were stunned when they heard those words. They looked at Duguchioma in surprise. There weren't many people in the Nantian region who dared to speak to Gu Xiaoyang like that. It could be said that other than the one monarch, the 4 sovereigns and the 10 princes, the other elites wouldn't dare to be so presumptuous in front of Gu Xiaoyang. Sure enough, after Duguchioma's words left his mouth, Gu Xiaoyang's expression suddenly became gloomy. A terrifying storm of true energy spread out from his body, causing the surrounding stars to sparkle. It was as if a starry sky had appeared. From this, one could see how extraordinary Gu Xiaoyang was. Do you know who you're talking to? Gu Xiaoyang's face was as cold as ice. I know. A conceited, arrogant, and ignorant dead man. Duguchioma said indifferently. He deserves to die. Gu Xiaoyang shouted coldly. Without saying anything else, he raised his hand and struck out the Daoyuo astral seal, which suppressed Duguchioma. Duguchioma also raised his hand and used the devouring energy explosion. The demonic light in the void exploded and collided with Gu Xiaoyang's Daoyuo astral seal. Seeing this, It Songyue also attacked. Waner giggled and said, Sister Tsongyue, don't you righteous cultivators hate bullying others with numbers? Waner waved her hand and shot out true chi to block It Songyue. On the other side, Yi Songshan raised his demonic edge sword and was about to attack Duguchioma. However, a cold figure flashed and blocked in front of Yi Songshan. Princess Luohoyu. Yi Songshan was slightly stunned. Princess Luoho didn't seem to have anything to do with Duguchioma, right? Furthermore, before the blood path opened, Duguchioma seemed to have flirted with Princess Luoho. He saved my life before. Princess Luoho's eyes flickered under the mask. However, even she didn't believe this reason. Since when did Princess Luoho, who is known for being cruel and cold-blooded, know how to repay a debt of gratitude? Yi Songshan's face darkened. Although Princess Luoho couldn't defeat him, she could still hold him back. Moreover, if Princess Luoho unsealed her fate, she would be even more difficult to deal with. Yi Songshan might not be able to subdue her. Seeing Princess Luoho block someone for him, Duguqioma was also a little surprised. However, Duguqioma's most important enemy was right in front of him. Under my sword, you shall be executed. Gu Xiaoyang stretched out his hand, and a beam of starlight shot out. It was the divine weapon of the 10 tribulations, the 7 stars illusionary god. He was determined to kill this guy who dared to offend him directly. Duguqioma also released his killing intent. In the past, Yi Guqin had always been suppressed by Gu Xiaoyang. Even in the Tianhuang Plain, he had to use all his strength and use the Eye of the Void to barely fight back. But now just Yi Guqin's clone, Duguqioma, was enough to fight against Gu Xiaoyang. Not to mention Yi Guqin's own strength. Who could compare to such a speed of improvement? Gu Xiaoyang, your life is mine. Chapter 1192. Duguqioma no longer suppressed the killing intent in his heart, and his fighting spirit blazed like a raging fire. It was a hatred that was engraved into his bones. It was the determination to kill his enemy. It could be said that all of Yi Guqin's grievances originated from Gu Xiaoyang. Therefore, Duguqioma wanted to fight Yi Guqin on behalf of Yi Guqin. Boom! Duguqioma activated the Azura Divine Residence, and blood-red Azura Qi gushed out from the Divine Residence, making Duguqioma look like a blood-soaked Azura. Gu Xiaoyang, give me your life. Duguqioma wielded the God Devourer sword, and his figure turned into a blood-red afterimage as he thrust his sword at Gu Xiaoyang. You're courting death. Gu Xiaoyang coldly roared. He didn't expect that a mere Empire Heaven Pride would dare to take the initiative to attack him. Gu Xiaoyang wielded the 7-star illusionary god, and displayed the Emperor-level sword art of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the 1000-star pilgrimage sword art. The speed of his sword was extremely fast, and every ray of sword light froze in the void like a speck of starlight. In the end, Gu Xiaoyang struck out a total of 10,000 swords, which looked like a magnificent starry sky. But every speck of starlight contained terrifying sword chi that was enough to kill a divine-dwelling heaven pride. This 1000-star pilgrimage sword technique had been completely cultivated by Gu Xiaoyang to the perfection realm. Kill! Gu Xiaoyang swung his sword, and the starlight transformed into dense sword chi that burst out. The 10,000 specks of cold light arrived first, and then the sword was like a dragon. The 10,000 rays of starlight whistled as if they could shatter the earth. Duguqioma gathered his Azura Chi and directly displayed the first 5 moves of the 13 demon swords. Blood Kill, Vanishing Shadow, Star Burn, Moon Slash, Sun Erode. The 5 swords were displayed at the same time, and sword light illuminated the world. This sword art originated from the demon sword Emperor Jitian, and its power was equally astonishing. Rumbling sounds shook the entire Azura Bloody Road, and the sword light illuminated the blood-red broken sky. The 2 swords collided, and the sound of metal piercing through stone and metal could be heard. Duguqioma felt a powerful impact sweeping over him, causing his arms to tremble slightly. As a heaven pride of the 6th layer of the divine dwelling, Gu Xiaoyang's strength was indeed extraordinary. However, Dugu was fearless in his pursuit of the devil. What's going on? Gu Xiaoyang was surprised. After the exchange of blows, although no cracks appeared on his 7 stars manifest god, it seemed to emit a mournful cry. His weapon is strange. Gu Xiaoyang narrowed his eyes. One had to know that Gu Xiaoyang's 7-star illusionary god was placed together with the famed sword of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, the 7-star Dragon Abyss. Nourished by the famed primordial swords, the power of the 7 stars manifest god was far stronger than that of ordinary 10th tribulation divine weapons. But in this collision, his weapon was actually at a disadvantage. Duguqioma was also surprised. However, he was surprised that Gu Xiaoyang's 10th tribulation divine weapon was so sturdy. He didn't know that Gu Xiaoyang's divine weapon had been nurtured by a real immemorial famed sword. It's a little strange, but you're too naive if you think you can rely on a divine weapon. Gu Xiaoyang brandished his sword while holding the Daoyuo astral seal in his hand. He pressed down on Duguqiuma's head, wanting to use a powerful method to kill Duguqiuma. Duguqiuma's expression was ice-cold as he used the God Devourer sword to block the 7 stars manifest god. Shortly after, he extended his hand and terrifying demonic light exploded, directly shattering Gu Xiaoyang's Daoyuo star seal. If it was the previous Duguqiuma facing Gu Xiaoyang, he would at least be at an absolute disadvantage, if not directly suppressed. However, after evolving the Azura Divine Dwelling and reaching the 3rd layer of the Divine Dwelling, Duguqiuma was able to contend with Gu Xiaoyang and not be at a disadvantage. On the other side, Wan who was entangled with Yi Tsungyue, said in surprise, "Isn't his strength rising too fast?" Although Duguqiuma was strong before, it was impossible for him to contend with Gu Xiaoyang, one of the 10 great Gongzi. But now he could do it. Yi Tsungyue's face was covered with frost. Only she knew that Duguqiuma had obtained the inheritance of a sacred ruler expert. In addition, he possessed the demon emperor descending to the 9th heaven phenomenon. It was imaginable to what extent Duguqiuma would grow in the future, if he was nurtured by the demonic extermination sect. It was unimaginable what kind of waves Duguqiuma would cause in the South Horizon region. Therefore, the best outcome was naturally for Gu Xiaoyang to kill Duguqiuma while he was still in his infancy. But unfortunately, Duguqiuma, who had obtained the inheritance of a sacred ruler, wasn't someone that Gu Xiaoyang could kill. Evil origin puppet. Duguqiuma raised his hand and struck out a powerful move. A black shockwave swept towards Gu Xiaoyang. Seeing this, Gu Xiaoyang gathered the star True Qi in his body and condensed it into a starry sky seal in his palm. It was even more powerful than the Daoyuo astral seal. Star Emperor seal. Gu Xiaoyang's aura rose. The starry sky seal pressed down as if it had the power to shatter mountains, rivers, sun and moon. Duguqiuma's aura was locked down. He couldn't dodge at all. The ground around him collapsed at the same time. Duguqiuma's white hair fluttered. He also raised his hand and used the Great Devouring God technique. A black vortex appeared, as if it could swallow everything in the world. The Star Emperor seal smashed into the black vortex and burst out with boundless waves, shattering the surrounding ground. Not far away, the Azura Blood Sea set off huge waves and washed the sky. Rumble. As if the stars had exploded, the shockwave spread out and hit Gu Xiaoyang and Duguqiuma at the same time. Duguqiuma directly activated the 3rd transformation battle god demonic body. Black demonic patterns spread on the surface of his body. His physical strength and defense instantly skyrocketed. The shockwave bombarded him, but it could only shake him. It couldn't hurt him. He stomped his foot on the ground and used imminent skyline. His figure instantly appeared in front of Gu Xiaoyang and slashed down with the God-devouring sword. Gu Xiaoyang blocked with his sword. With a clang, the two of them attacked with their swords so fast that they were like afterimages. Sparks and explosions continuously sounded. Yi Tsungyue, Wan and the others, who were fighting not far away, were shocked when they saw this. Yi Tsongshan also frowned slightly and muttered to himself, "I didn't expect him to have grown to such a level." Previously, Yi Tsongshan didn't think much of Duguqiuma and didn't take him seriously. But now the combat strength that Duguqiuma displayed surprised him. Damn it. Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were extremely gloomy. He didn't expect Duguqiuma to be so difficult to deal with. Thinking of this, Gu Xiaoyang no longer held back and used his own sword principle. Vast sword intent spread out, and seemed to turn his surroundings into a dazzling starry sky. However, this magnificent and vast starry sky contained fatal killing intent. It was Gu Xiaoyang's peerless star sword principle. Gu Xiaoyang raised his sword into the sky. Tens of thousands of sword lights flashed in the starry sky. Then the stars shook and turned into boundless sword qi that swept toward Duguqiuma. Peerless star sword principle? Duguqiuma muttered to himself. In fact, his god-devouring sword also contained a creation-level sword principle, the devouring sword principle. However, Duguqiuma couldn't comprehend it for the time being. However, Duguqiuma could use the sword principle that Yi Guqin had comprehended. Chapter 1193. Duguqiuma raised his sword and a burst of sword intent spread around him. As the sword intent spread out, the blood-red sky seemed to be filled with rolling thunderclouds and thunder. It was the peerless lightning sword principle. In fact, the Azura sword principle was the most suitable for Duguqiuma's own power attribute. However, because his opponent was Gu Xiaoyang, it was inevitable that he would be confused and notice if he used the Azura sword principle. Therefore, Duguqiuma could only choose to use the lightning sword principle. Of course, the lightning sword principle was not inferior to the Azura sword principle in terms of explosive attack power. As Duguqiuma used the lightning sword principle, the God Devourer sword also burst out with lightning. He swung his sword and the blazing lightning swept out like a torrent, colliding with Gu Xiaoyang's starry sword light. Lightning sword principle? Gu Xiaoyang's face darkened again. This dynasty's genius that he did not take seriously at the beginning had exceeded his expectations again and again. Seeing this, Gu Xiaoyang used his ultimate move again. The starry sword intent surged and turned into a dazzling river of stars in the sky. It was the starry sword principle's sword principle domain, starry river dazzling 9 heavens. Gu Xiaoyang held the 7 stars illusionary god and swung his sword down. The river of stars fell, and the sword chi surged like a vast ocean. It was so powerful that it seemed to want to wash the entire Azura blood road. Duguqiuma was also unwilling to retreat, and used the lightning sword principle's sword principle domain. Heaven's punishment thunder prison. Duguqiuma raised his sword with both hands and the power of lightning surged out, turning into a dazzling ball of lightning in the sky. Then countless bolts of lightning swarmed out like dragons, wanting to imprison this part of the world and drown everything in the lightning. This was a huge collision between 2 peerless sword principle domains, and it burst out a huge wave. The Azura Blood Road mystic realm was already on the verge of collapsing. Because of this fierce collision, it began to crumble even faster. The Azura Blood Road is about to collapse. Wonder's beautiful eyes flashed. There was no point in continuing the fight because they would all be teleported out soon. Yi Songshan's eyes were very cold because he was busy with Princess Luoho and had no time to attack Duguqiuma. It would be strange if Yi Songshan was in a good mood when the opportunity that he had been plotting for so long had gone to someone else. Rumble. The entire Azura Blood Road was collapsing. Cracks that were tens of thousands of feet long were spreading across the sky. After the Azura Saint King's clone dissipated, the Azura Bloody Road was supposed to collapse. The battle between Gu Xiaoyang and Duguqiuma merely sped up the process. Finally, the entire Azura Blood Road mystic realm collapsed. Duguqiuemo and the others were swallowed up by the space vortex and forcefully brought out of this space. At the same time, in the outside world in the Blood Demon Valley, the atmosphere was so silent and solemn that it was somewhat frightening. And the source of this silent atmosphere came from the mystic demon palace. The expressions of the experts from the mysterious demon hall were frighteningly cold when they saw the names of Yuan Hua and Hun Moz disappear from the bloodlight screen. Fan Yuan's face was filled with disbelief. He did not believe that Yuan Hua and Hun Moz would die in the Azura Blood Road. However, what was more coincidental was that the 2 deaths seemed to be related to Duguqiuma. Duguqiuma's score was also ranked first. No, I don't believe that Yuan Hua would die in the hands of Duguqiuma. Fan Yuan could not believe it. Not to mention him. Even Pei Tu and the others from the Heavenly Demon Sect had a suspicious look. It was already surprising that Duguqiuma could kill Hun Moz, but if he killed Yuan Hua, it was indeed a little unbelievable. Could there be a mistake? Even the Demon Queen's charming face showed a trace of doubt. At first, she was actually a little interested in the white-haired sword demon who was famous in the Moro dynasty and had slaughtered 13 cities. She even thought that he might be a strong contender for the position of the emperor's son-in-law. But when she saw Duguqiuma, the Demon Queen was a little disappointed. This was because Duguqiuma was not even at the divine dwelling stage. He was far from meeting the Demon Queen's requirements for her daughter's husband. Therefore, the Demon Queen also suspected that there was something wrong with the blood-red light curtain, or that something else had happened in the Azura Blood Road. Maybe there's something wrong with the light curtain. Fan Yuan and the others from the Mystic Demon Palace held a glimmer of hope in their hearts. However, the blood-red door in the Blood Demon Valley suddenly trembled and was covered with cracks. Then the space distorted and several figures were blasted out like exploding fish. They were the surviving experts. What's going on? What happened? Everyone's eyes were fixed on the scene. The Azura blood road is gone. A cultivator murmured absent-mindedly. What? The Moro imperial family and the people of the 6 great forces were taken aback when they heard this. The Azura blood road had always been one of the most famous secret domains in the Moro dynasty. How could it be gone just like that? However, the cultivators who were teleported out all described the same situation. They couldn't help but believe it. At this moment, a few more figures wrapped in brilliance appeared, accompanied by the sounds of intense clashes. It was Princess Luo Ho and the others. 2 of the figures were still engaged in a fierce battle. That's Duguqioma. Everyone quickly locked onto the identity of one of the figures. His white hair fluttered in the wind and blood-red chi surged. It was Duguqioma. As for the other person he was fighting, many forces and martial artists were surprised. And that person is. Some people were hesitant, but soon someone recognized him. The person fighting with Duguqioma seems to be Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion? What? Everyone was shocked as they looked towards the battle between Duguqioma and Gu Xiaoyang. They didn't expect that a heaven pride from an overlord force would come to the Moro dynasty. However, a moment later, Yi Songyue and Waner were recognized one after another, causing an uproar. What? The witch of the demonic sect? The demon queen was surprised. However, what surprised her more was that Duguqioma's strength was enough to compete with Gu Xiaoyang. But who was Gu Xiaoyang? He was one of the top 10 young masters, young master Xingyun. Didn't that mean that Duguqioma's true strength was at the level of the top 10 young masters? Upon coming to this realization, the Infernal Queen and company drew a gasp. Pei Tu of the Sky Demon sect finally made his move. He raised his hand and unleashed the strength of a false saint, separating Duguqioma and Gu Xiaoyang. You. Gu Xiaoyang's expression was cold. Young Master Gu, this is the Moro dynasty. Even if you're the heaven's pride of the Starry Sword Pavilion, you should know how to restrain yourself. Duguqioma is the saint of the Sky Demon sect. I can't just watch you fight, Pei Tu said in a deep voice. Now that Duguqioma had won first place in the Azura Blood Road, he had endless potential and was strong enough to compete with the top 10 young masters. He was the treasure of the Sky Demon sect. How could Pei Tu just watch Gu Xiaoyang attack Duguqioma? However, because of Gu Xiaoyang's background, Pei Tu couldn't really do anything to him. Otherwise, he might incur the wrath of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. Chapter 1194. You want to stop me? Gu Xiaoyang's face turned ugly. Pei Tu said coldly, Young Master Gu, please pay attention to your words. Although you are a heaven pride of the Starry Sword Pavilion, I am also a false saint expert. A false saint expert had the dignity of a false saint expert. Even if Gu Xiaoyang had an extraordinary background, he was still only a divine dwelling heaven pride. It was extremely disrespectful to speak to a false saint expert in such a tone. Gu Xiaoyang exhaled deeply. He knew that with a false saint expert intervening, it would be very difficult and almost impossible for him to kill Duguqioma. Duguqioma, you really only know how to be a coward, Gu Xiaoyang said coldly. You can't do anything to me. Duguqioma's face was indifferent. If Duguqioma used all his trump cards, he might be able to pose a fatal threat to Gu Xiaoyang. But Gu Xiaoyang was one of the top 10 young masters and a seat of the Starry Sword Pavilion. It was impossible for him to not have any trump cards. Therefore, if they really fought to the death, the final result would be very difficult to predict. But if Duguqioma cultivated for a period of time, his strength would grow with time, and he might not have to pay too much of a price to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Therefore, now was not the best time to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Moreover, there was a group of people watching, and Duguqioma did not want to use all his trump cards. If you come to participate in the Heaven Pride battlefield, I will definitely turn your bones into ashes. Gu Xiaoyang flung his sleeve, temporarily suppressing his killing intent. After all, this was the Molo Empire and not the Starry Sword Pavilion. No matter how special his identity was, it was impossible for him to kill Duguqioma under the protection of a false saint expert. It's not certain who will be buried. Duguchioma's lips curved into a cold smile. If he joined forces with Yi Guqin's true body at that time, it was easy to imagine how embarrassed Gu Xiaoyang would be. Fairy Songyue, let's go, Gu Xiaoyang said softly to Yi Songyue, who did not want to stay here any longer. Yi Songyue's clear eyes were cold, resentful and complicated. Yi Songyue had an indescribable feeling towards the man who had taken her virginity. However, one thing was certain. Yi Songyue would not let Dugu off so easily. He would not let it go for all eternity. Yi Songyue turned around and left decisively without any hesitation. Looking at Yi Songyue's cold and lonely back, Duguchioma actually had a rare complicated feeling in his heart. Of course, it was only a sliver. His emotions quickly returned to indifference. Yi Songyue and Gu Xiaoyang left. On the other side, Yi Songshen's eyes revealed a wisp of heaviness and unwillingness. Duguchioma said indifferently, "Do you want to fight me?" He was not even afraid of Gu Xiaoyang. Although Yi Songshen had a special background, he was not afraid of him. Yi Songshen took a deep breath. He really wanted to fight with Duguchioma and snatch his fortuitous opportunity. However, he couldn't do that in front of so many people. That was because his special background was too sensitive. If it was exposed, it would be extremely disadvantageous for him. Sir Wei, his old servant, the old man at the false saint level, wanted to say something, but stopped. "Let's go first," Yi Songshen said in a deep voice. Then he looked at Duguchioma and said, "Don't be too proud. That opportunity is only temporarily with you. I'll take it back in the battlefield." After saying that, Yi Songshen and his old servant also left. At that moment, only the people from the various forces of the Molo dynasty and the demon were left. At that moment, a cold voice with murderous intent came from the mystic demon palace. The person who spoke was a false saint expert from the mystic demon palace. He did not see Yuan Hua come out. His last hope was shattered. Yuan Hua had really died in the Azura Bloody Road. "You killed Yuan Hua and Hun Mozi?" The false saint expert from the mystic demon palace's murderous intent seemed to freeze the space. "That's right," Duguchioma said in a casual tone. Boom. The experts from the mystic demon palace could not help but release their auras. Their eyes were overflowing with anger. How could he still be so calm after killing two heavenly talents from the mystic demon palace? It was not just the mystic demon palace. The experts from the Six Desire Demon sect also stepped out and said, "Did you also kill Miao Yu from the Six Desire Demon sect?" "Indeed," Duguchioma said indifferently. "And Shan Yu from the Demonic Beast sect as well?" The expert from the Demonic Beast sect said coldly. "Of course," Duguchioma said indifferently. Boom. The false saints from the three forces all looked gloomy and angry. Under such a situation, even Pei Tu felt great pressure. He, a false saint, could not resist three false saints at the same time. However, Duguchioma was calm in the face of the three forces' murderous intent. His expression would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, because he knew that someone definitely did not want him to die. Just as the experts from the three forces could not help but want to attack, a pleasant voice with a cold intent sounded. "If you want to die, you can attack Duguchioma." The person who spoke was Wan'er the witch. Seeing this, the experts from the three forces' expressions changed slightly. Wan'er was backed by the demonic extermination sect, an overlord force. However, they could not understand why the witch of the demonic extermination sect would protect Duguchioma. Could it be? On the other side, the demon queen was deep in thought. She thought of the demon king ascending the nine heavens vision that had shaken the South Horizon region. If that was the case, the demon queen took a deep breath. No wonder Wan'er would protect Duguchioma. "Which, although you are from the demonic extermination sect, this is a grudge between our forces. It has nothing to do with you," the false saint from the mystic demon palace said in a low voice. "How does it have nothing to do with me?" Wan'er tilted her head and asked, "What does it have to do with you?" The expert from the Six Desire Demon sect said coldly. Wan'er's words were shocking. She said directly, "Duguchioma wants to join the demonic extermination sect. Are you sure you want to attack him?" "What?" Wan'er's words shocked all the other forces. Their eyes bulged out of their sockets. Duguqiu Emo wanted to join the demonic extermination sect? The experts from the Mystic Demon Palace, the Demonic Beast sect, and the Six Desire Demon sect all had ugly expressions. It was as if they had eaten a dead fly. They could ignore the Sky Demon sect, but they could not ignore the Demonic Extermination sect. How is this possible? How can that kid? The experts from the three forces clenched their fists. Although they were unwilling, they did not dare to act rashly. If what Wan'er said was true, then the price they would have to pay if they killed Duguqiu Mo was the Demonic Extermination sect's revenge. The Demon Queen said, "Life and death in the Azura Blood Road are up to the heavens. Killing is not forbidden. Yuan Hua's death can only be attributed to his lack of strength." Hearing the Demon Queen speak, the experts from the three forces could only swallow their anger. It was not that they did not want to deal with Duguqiu Mo, but the current Duguqiu Mo was no longer someone they could touch. Duguqiu Mo was slightly surprised. He did not expect the Demon Queen to speak up for him. One had to know that the Demon Queen's attitude towards him was one of disdain and neglect. The Demon Queen smiled and said, "By the way, when the Azura Blood Road opened, I said that I would choose a husband for the princess. I wonder if you, Duguqiu Mo, are willing to be the prince consort of the Molo dynasty?" As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was stunned. Chapter 1195. Back when the Azura Blood Road had just opened, the Demon Queen had looked down on Duguqiu Mo. She even thought that he was not qualified to compete for the position of the Mara dynasty's prince consort. But now, the Demon Queen was so attentive to Duguqiu Mo that she even took the initiative to invite him. "Mother, what are you talking about?" Princess Luoho's face under the mask changed slightly. She did not know what to feel. Originally, she should have been repulsed by this, but now she had a complicated feeling. "I think he's very suitable to be the Mara dynasty's prince consort." The Demon Queen smiled. She vaguely guessed that Duguqiu Mo was probably the unparalleled Demon King who had caused the Demon King to descend to the ninth heaven. Otherwise, he would definitely not be favored by the Demon Queen of the demonic sect. Besides, other than Duguqiu Mo, she could not find a more suitable candidate. Yi Songshan came from the dark world, so he was not suitable to be the prince consort. As for Yuan Hua, Soul Demon Master, and the other top 10 male sky prides of the blood ranking, they had all died in the hands of Duguqiu Mo. Therefore, Duguqiu Mo seemed to be the only candidate. Not to mention that Duguqiu Mo was very powerful and could compete with the 10 great childs. There was another reason why the Demon Queen wanted to choose a son-in-law for Princess Luoho. She wanted Princess Luoho to have someone to take care of her on the battlefield of Sky Prides. Duguqiu Mo's strength was enough to protect Princess Luoho. Pei Tu and the other experts of the Heavenly Demon sect were happy to see the Demon Queen's intention of marriage. On the other hand, Qingqing smiled bitterly when she saw this scene. However, she was relieved now. It was enough to have fate with Duguqiu Mo. Duguqiu Mo was not someone she could keep. The gap between her and Duguqiu Mo had widened. They were not even on the same level. "Daughter, this is a good match," the Demon Queen advised with a smile. Princess Luoho did not say a word. She had always been cold and indifferent. At this moment, she had a complicated feeling like a little girl. Seeing this, Wan'er smiled and said, "Being with Duguqiu Mo won't be a bad thing, because," as Wan'er spoke, she took light steps and landed beside Princess Luoho. She lowered her voice and whispered something. Princess Luoho's delicate body immediately tensed up. Her cold and beautiful eyes under the mask revealed a wisp of extreme surprise. "He's actually, Shu. It's good that you know. Don't say it out loud." Wan'er smiled. Princess Luoho's heart trembled, and she was momentarily stunned. Wan'er had just told her that Duguqiu Mo was the one who had triggered the Demon King descends to the 9 heavens. Previously, Princess Luoho had told the Infernal Queen that she was only interested in the person who had triggered the phenomenon of the heavenly baneful star, and the Infernal Emperor. Never would she have thought that Duguqiu Mo was the one who had triggered the Devil Emperor phenomenon. Of course, if she knew that the heavenly curse Lone Star phenomenon was also triggered by Duga's plea to the devil, she would be even more shocked. What? You still don't want to? Wan'er smiled. Princess Luoho fell silent and felt a little bashful. However, from the Infernal Queen's point of view, Princess Luoho's lack of objection meant that she had agreed. Duguchioemo, what about you? The Infernal Queen looked at Duguchioemo. Duguchioemo pondered for a moment. He still needed Princess Luoho's Luoho life providence to help him activate the heavenly baneful life providence. Therefore, he did not refuse and nodded lightly. When Princess Luoho saw this, an unnatural blush appeared on her usually cold face. All right, then it's decided. The Infernal Queen appeared very happy. As for the opportunity that Duguchioemo had obtained, no one dared to target him with his current status. The Azura Bloody Path had come to an end. Of course, the Azura Bloody Path would not open again in the future because the entire mystic realm would no longer exist. And the one who had benefited the most was naturally Duguchioemo. He had naturally replaced Yi Tsongshan as the #1 genius of the Mola dynasty. After that, Wan'er also looked for Duguchioemo alone to ask about it. She asked Duguchioemo if he wanted to follow her back to Annihilation Demonic Sect or something else. In fact, Duguchioemo did not need to participate in the battlefield of the elites, because he could already become a disciple of Annihilation Demonic Sect. However, Duguchioemo still decided to participate, because the battlefield of the elites was also a rare experience and opportunity. There might be an opportunity for Duguchioemo to break through to the supremacy realm. Not to mention, he still had to work with Yi Guchen's original body to deal with Gu Xiaoyang, Huang Qianqiu, Di Haotian, and the others. Although Yi Guchen was not weak, the enemies were equally strong. No matter how strong Yi Guchen was, it was impossible for him to defeat all these opponents by himself. However, if Duguchioemo's power was added, he would have nothing to fear if his original body and clone worked together. Seeing that Duguchioemo was determined to participate in the battlefield of the elites, Wan'er could only give up on the idea of bringing him back to the sect for the time being. You have to live well. After all, if you join Annihilation Demonic Sect in the future, you might be able to participate in the competition for the position of Junior Sect Master, Wan'er said solemnly. The competition in Annihilation Demonic Sect was also fierce. We'll talk about it when the time comes, Duguchioemo said calmly. Wan'er raised her brows and said, You can't be careless. The strongest genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect is on the same level as one of the 4 princes. Oh. Duguchioemo was surprised. He did not expect that a genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect was one of the 4 princes. In other words, the genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect was also on the same level as Huang Qianqiu. When the time comes, he will also participate in the battlefield of the elites. If he finds out about you, he might kill you, so be careful, Wan'er warned. Got it. Duguchioemo nodded slightly. Although there was one more potential enemy, Duguchioemo was still not afraid. In the end, the witch also left for the time being to prepare for the battlefield of the elites. Duguchioemo did not return to Heavenly Demon Sect. Instead, he followed the Demon Queen and the others back to the Mara royal family. With Wan'er and Annihilation Demonic Sect as his backing, Duguchioemo was not afraid that the Mara royal family would do anything to him. After returning to the Mara royal family, although Princess Luoho and Duguchioemo had not held their wedding ceremony for the time being, the 2 of them were already living in the same palace. Duguchioemo had borrowed Princess Luoho's Luoho life providence to comprehend his Heaven Fiend life providence. At the same time, because Duguchioemo had broken through to the divine dwelling stage, his soul-devouring demon eye had also awakened the ability of the spirit demon seed. In other words, he could plant a demon seed in the enemy's knowledge sea and enslave them. Of course, this was only effective on those who were weaker than Duguchioemo, or those who did not have a strong soul will. The effect would be greatly reduced on the heaven prides of the same level. However, to Duguchioemo's surprise, Princess Luoho gritted her teeth and said she wanted him to help her deal with an opponent who had once displeased her. Who is it? Duguchioemo asked. Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty Duguwu Bai. Princess Luoho said. Princess Luoho was very upset when she thought of how she had suffered at the hands of Yi Guchen in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure trove. Sure. Duguchioemo smiled. If he encountered his true body, it would not be a bad idea to spar with him. Duguchiomo also wanted to know who was stronger between him and his true body. Chapter 1196. After the Azura Bloody Road, Duguchiomo stayed in the imperial palace to cultivate and prepare for the Azura Bloody Road. On the other side, at the border of the Mola Empire, Yi Songyue and Gu Xiaoyang flew across the sky one after another. "Young Master Gu, you don't have to follow me anymore," Yi Songyue said coldly and expressionlessly. "Fairy Songyue, what's wrong with you?" Gu Xiaoyang asked suspiciously. Ever since Yi Songyue and Duguchiomo came out of the Opportunity Secret Realm, Yi Songyue seemed to be in a bad mood. Although Yi Songyue was cold to him before, it was not to the point of annoyance. However, Yi Songyue was too lazy to travel with him now. "It's nothing. I'm tired. Is that okay?" Yi Songyue walked away and shook Gu Xiaoyang off. "What's going on? Could it be? No. Impossible." Gu Xiaoyang's heart skipped a beat. A thought that he found somewhat impossible emerged in his mind. No, it can't be like this. Fairy Songyue must have other reasons for being so pure. "Duguchiomo, if you participate in the prodigy battlefield, I'll kill you." Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were extremely cold. On the other side, Yi Songyue held her stomach with one hand and looked confused. She felt that the immortal divine embryo in her body seemed to have undergone some kind of shocking transformation. It seemed like it was about to give birth to something. "Duguchiomo, could it be that you?" Yi Songyue did not dare to think too deeply. There was a rare trace of confusion and uneasiness in her heart. Sword Dynasty in the Sword Catacomb. A handsome young man in a black robe and black hair sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. A terrifying and powerful sword concept rolled around his body. It was Yi Guchen. When he was alone, he would take off his grimace mask. At a certain moment, Yi Guchen suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be a golden light flowing in his dark eyes. He raised his hand, and the 9-dragon thunder prison fell into his hand. He pointed his sword at the sky and caused the sky to change color. "Sky as Qian." Then Yi Guchen pointed his other hand at the ground. "Earth as Kuren." Pointing up at the heavens, pointing down at the earth. "Between the heavens and the earth, only I am supreme. Unifying heaven and earth, unparalleled Saint Sword." Yi Guchen gathered his genuine qi, and an extremely dazzling golden sword aura appeared. It was like a divine light that could split the heavens and the earth. It illuminated the sky and slashed the earth. As the sword slashed down, the entire sword tomb rumbled and trembled. The sword qi storm that roiled in the surroundings all year round temporarily stopped because of this resplendent sword. In front of Yi Guchen, a 300-meter-long and 10-meter-deep fissure appeared. Its destructive power was extremely strong. "Is this the power of the sacred sword of heaven and earth?" Yi Guchen muttered to himself. During this period of time, he had always been in seclusion in the sword tomb, comprehending various sword arts and martial arts, and his gains were also great. Yi Guchen had finally succeeded in his initial cultivation of the sacred sword of Qiankuan. Its power did not disappoint Yi Guchen. In addition, Yi Guchen had completely mastered the 8 sword moves of the 8 extremities reincarnation sword technique. Of course, Yi Guchen had not completely comprehended the combination of the 8 moves yet, but he was not far away. The reincarnation sword lotus, the unique skill of the 6th generation sword master, had been completely mastered. Being able to perform the perfect 360 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus, its power was also incomparable. There was also the most important ultimate sword realm. Yi Guchen could perform the combination of 3 sword realms, and its power was several times stronger than the combination of 2 sword realms. However, for the ultimate sword realm, only the combination of 4 sword realms could be considered a complete ultimate sword realm. "I have gained a lot during this period of seclusion." Yi Guchen exhaled softly. Although his realm did not increase, the various sword arts had increased Yi Guchen's combat power. His current combat power was more than twice as strong as before he went into seclusion. Yi Guchen had made ample preparations for the battlefield of Sky Prides. "Oh yes, there's also this." Yi Guchen seemed to have thought of something. A sparkling and resplendent sword embryo that flowed with chaotic energy emerged from his body. It was the Khanate sword embryo. It was also Yi Guqin's gifted superpower as a 7th-grade Sky Pride. However, at this moment, the sword embryo seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. A layer of strange light enveloped the sword embryo, as if it had an indestructible power. Itsungyue. Yi Guqin sighed deeply. When he was in seclusion in the sword tomb, Yi Guqin had focused on cultivating, and had not taken the initiative to sense Duguqiomo's situation. It was only after he went into seclusion that Yi Guqin found out about this matter. Of course, Yi Guqin could not blame Duguqiomo. After all, Duguqiomo was his demonic doppelganger. His behavior and character were not exactly the same as his. Let's put the matter of Itsungyue aside for now. However, has this sword embryo transformed into the innate indestructible sword embryo? Yi Guqin scrutinized the sword embryo. The innate indestructible sword embryo and the innate indestructible divine embryo could be merged into the innate indestructible sword embryo. This was why Gu Xiaoyang, who had obtained the sword embryo, had been pestering Itsungyue. However, the innate indestructible sword embryo had now been obtained by Yi Guqin. Of course, if it were Yi Guqin, he would definitely not do anything to Itsungyue for the sake of the innate indestructible sword embryo. It could only be said that everything was due to fate, and there was no reason for it. I'll think of a way to deal with Itsungyue in the future. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly. Now that his seclusion had come to an end, continuing it would not be of much help to Yi Guqin. He put on the ghost mask and walked out of the sword tomb. As soon as he walked out, he saw a girl in green with a silver sword master mask waiting for him. Master! Seeing that Yi Guqin had come out of seclusion, the girl flashed to his side. It was Mu Xingzu. What's the matter? Yi Guqin smiled faintly. Master, the opening of the battlefield of prodigies is near, but Xingzu wants to go somewhere. Mu Xingzu said hesitantly. Oh, where is it? Yi Guqin asked. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty, Mu Xingzu said. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty? Yi Guqin was momentarily stunned. If Mu Xingzu had not mentioned it, he would have forgotten about it. Ever since the Battle of the Infinite Plains, Yi Guqin had been stranded in the Cloud Dynasty, and then came to the Sword Dynasty. He had always been in the midst of intense battles and cultivation. He had indeed forgotten that there was a group of people who always remembered him. There was also a girl who missed him. Yin Wushuang. Yi Guqin murmured in his heart. The delicate and stubborn face of a girl appeared in his mind. Master, can we go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty to take a look? Mu Xingzu asked carefully. She was also a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. When she heard that the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest had moved to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, she had been thinking about it, and wanted to see her senior brothers and sisters. It's not good to let them know that I'm still alive for now, Yi Guqin said with a sigh. It was not that he did not trust the people of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. It was because there were too many people in the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. If his identity was accidentally revealed, the consequences would be unimaginable. If the news that the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui was Yi Guqin got out, in less than a day, the Celestial Sword Sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, and Dongfang family would send troops to the Sword Dynasty. If the three forces attacked, even the half-step Holy King Proud Continent would find it difficult to resist. So the consequences were too serious. Yi Guqin did not dare to be careless. It did not matter whether Yi Guqin lived or died, but he did not want to be a burden to the Sword Dynasty. If Yi Guqin really wanted to reveal his identity, he would have to at least wait until after he participated in the Prodigy battlefield, and an overlord was willing to recruit him. At that time, Yi Guqin's name would reappear in the world. I see. Xingzhu didn't think it through properly. Mu Xingzu lowered her head and was a little unhappy. Of course, she could understand Yi Guqin. I only said that I can't reveal my identity. Did I say that I won't go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty? Yi Guqin chuckled. Chapter 1197. What? Can we really go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty to see senior brother and senior sister? Mu Xingzu asked excitedly. Of course, but I have to hide my identity and I can't get in touch with them for the time being. Yi Guchen said. The fewer people who knew that he was still alive, the better. After all, if Yi Guchen's identity was exposed in advance, it would be a disaster for him and the Sword Dynasty. That's fine, as long as we can catch up with senior brother and senior sister. Mu Xingzu said happily. Well, get ready and let's go. Yi Guchen waved his hand. In fact, he also wanted to go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. He wanted to see his old friends from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Yan Wushuang, Jiling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and Sect Master Yan Chang'e and the others. How were they? After learning that Yi Guchen and Mu Xingzu were going to leave the Sword Dynasty temporarily, Proud Divine Continent sent a false sacred expert to follow them, just in case. After all, Yi Guchen had made a lot of enemies after the battle between the three dynasties. When Yi Guchen heard this, he felt a little helpless and could only agree. A day later, Yi Guchen, Mu Xingzu, and a new false sacred expert called Lin Tu, who had just joined the Sword Dynasty, drove a flying boat and left the Sword Dynasty. The South Horizon region's 100 Great Dynasties. Although they were called the 100 Great Dynasties, it was actually just a general term. Large and small dynasties were scattered all over the land of the South Horizon region. For example, the Sword Dynasty, which was ranked first, was naturally located in the central area of the South Horizon region. The weaker the dynasty, the more remote it was. For example, the Saint Origin Dynasty was just a low-level dynasty located at the edge of the South Horizon region. As for the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, it had a top honorable martial artist, and was a high-level dynasty, located near the central area of the South Horizon region. However, although the Swallow Cloud Dynasty was a high-level dynasty, it was only ranked 70th or 80th among the 100 Great Dynasties. After all, it was very difficult for a dynasty without a false saint to hold the fort. Compared to the Sword Dynasty, which was the #1 dynasty, the gap was like the distance between the clouds and the mud. The Sword Dynasty and Swallow Cloud Dynasty were separated by more than 10 dynasties. It would take at least 10 days to reach the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. On the 5th day, Yi Guchen and the others once again flew over the sky of another empire. That empire was currently gathering its troops. Over 1 million soldiers were gathered together, and their might was boundless. Which dynasty is that? Yi Guchen had nothing to do, so he asked casually. It seems to be the Phoenix Nia dynasty, said Lin Tu, the pseudo-saint expert who had come with them. Phoenix Nia dynasty. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. The Phoenix Nia dynasty was a top-tier dynasty ranked 16th among the 100 Great Dynasties. Its foundation was extraordinary. Yi Guchen hadn't forgotten the first time he had met the #1 beauty of the Fengni dynasty, Princess Fengxi, in the Sheng Yuan dynasty's imperial capital, although she had a hostile relationship with Yan Wushuang at first. But gradually, her relationship with Yi Guchen and the others became harmonious. Princess Fengxi even had a little ambiguous relationship with Yi Guchen. At that time, Princess Fengxi was the princess of a top-tier dynasty, while Yi Guchen was just a disciple of a low-tier dynasty. The difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. But now, Yi Guchen's status as a Jiankui had far surpassed Princess Fengxi's. Forget it. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly and dismissed the idea of meeting Princess Fengxi. He wasn't particularly familiar with Princess Fengxi. They could only be considered to have crossed paths. After another 5 or 6 days, Yi Guchen finally arrived at the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty didn't have a large territory, but it wasn't weak among the top-tier dynasties. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to squeeze into the top 100. But there was something that made Yi Guchen frown slightly. When he came in from the border of the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, he saw that the various cities were heavily guarded. It was as if a war was about to break out. Could it be? Yi Guchen's eyes flashed with a trace of darkness. Next, Yi Guchen drove the flying boat to the capital of the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, the Swallow Capital. As the imperial capital of the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, the Swallow Capital should be bustling with life and tourists. But now, the Swallow Capital seemed a little desolate. There were much fewer people coming and going. This was because something big had happened recently. Empress Fengni of the Phoenix Dynasty was about to lead an army to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. There were rumors that it was because Empress Fengmi still had a grudge against the former prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Yin Chang'e. At this moment, on a tall building in the imperial palace of the Swallow capital, a young girl stood by the eaves of the tall building. The wind blew over and her silky black hair fluttered. She was wearing a light blue silk skirt with a graceful figure. That pair of perfectly proportioned, round and smooth jade-like legs made the young girl even more slender and elegant, like a delicate and upright daffodil. This girl was Yen Wuxia. At this moment, she was looking into the distance with some reminiscence and confusion in her eyes. Yen Wuxia had been like this for nearly a year, often leaning against the side of the tall building. How she wished that one day, a figure would appear from the horizon and return on a seven-colored cloud. But Yen Wuxia knew that this was just wishful thinking. It's been an entire year. Yen Wuxia's exquisite face was dim and dejected. Compared to her stubbornness before, she was valiant and heroic. Yen Wuxia now looked a little haggard and weak. At this moment, a pair of jade-like arms suddenly wrapped around Yen Wuxia's slender waist. Then, a pretty face peeked out from the side. Wuxia, do you miss him again? The girl had a ponytail and was always smiling as she comforted Yen Wuxia. Who else could it be other than Jiling? Yen Wuxia frowned and remained silent. I believe that junior brother Yi isn't dead. One has to believe in something, right? Jiling comforted. Thank you, Jiling. Yen Wuxia forced a smile. If Jiling hadn't been by her side for the past year, she would have been in even more pain. Just then, a handsome young man in luxurious clothes hurriedly walked up the stairs and said, Cousin Wuxia, that prince is here again. Quickly go and greet him. If Yi Guchen was here, he would definitely recognize that the young man in luxurious clothes was Yen Xiaotang, who'd been to the Sword Sex Forest of Pagodas. He'd even gotten into a lot of unpleasantness with Yi Guchen. It's him again. That fellow who's harassing Wuxia. Why don't you tell him to scram? Jiling's expression immediately changed, and she shouted with knitted brows. Yen Xiaotang said with a straight face. How can you say that? That prince is here to help the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Without his help, what can our Swallow Cloud dynasty use to deal with the Phoenix dynasty? So you want Wuxia to be his concubine? Jiling glared. What's wrong with being his concubine? He's the prince of the Great Qian dynasty. Do you know the Great Qian dynasty? It's a powerful dynasty ranked 12th among the 100 great dynasties. It's even more powerful than the Phoenix dynasty. When the Great Qian dynasty was mentioned, Yen Xiaotang's eyes couldn't help but reveal deep reverence and respect. That was a powerful dynasty ranked 12th. To put it bluntly, any one or two false saint experts could destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In Yen Xiaotang's opinion, if the Swallow Cloud dynasty could obtain the help of the Great Qian dynasty, then the Phoenix dynasty would be nothing. What was the Phoenix Nye dynasty? Chapter 1198. After hearing Yen Xiaotang's words, Yen Wuxia and Jiling didn't look too good. Jiling especially didn't want Yen Wuxia to be that lecher's concubine. However, the name of the Great Qian dynasty was like an ancient mountain that pressed down on their hearts. The Great Qian dynasty was ranked 12th among the 100 great dynasties. There were more than 10 false saint experts in the dynasty, and it could be said to be extremely powerful. The Yanyan dynasty wasn't even an ant in front of the Great Qian dynasty. Even the 16th ranked Fengni dynasty wasn't willing to openly go against the Great Qian dynasty. Cousin, think about it carefully. It's the Great Qian dynasty. Yen Xiaotang was still trying to persuade her. Previously, he also had some thoughts about Yen Wuxia, but he completely cut it off later because he knew that Yen Wuxia didn't like him at all. Now that the Yanyan dynasty was in danger, only Yen Wuxia could save the entire dynasty. Yen Xiaotang took the initiative to step forward and wanted to matchmake this matter. Are you still Wuxia's cousin? Why aren't you thinking about her at all? Don't you know what kind of person the Great Qian prince is? Jiling was so angry that her face turned red. The 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty was dissolute and promiscuous. He had more than 100 concubines. Would Yen Wuxia be happy to marry such a vile prince as his concubine? Yen Xiaotang pulled a long face and said to Yen Wuxia, Are you still thinking about Yi Guchen? Yin Wushuang lowered her head and remained silent. Yin Xiaoting shook his head and said, "Cousin Wushuang, look on the bright side. Yi Guqin is already dead. It's all in the past. The dead can't come back to life." Yin Wushuang clenched her jade-like hands tightly, and a trace of pain appeared on her exquisite face. Yin Xiaoting didn't care at all and continued, "Even if Yi Guqin is still alive, so what? Can he save the Yinyan dynasty and help us deal with the Fengni dynasty? No. That's why we have to look on the bright side. I think the 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty is quite sincere." "Enough, shut up," Ji Ling reprimanded. She couldn't listen to it anymore. "Sai, no matter what, you should at least go and take a look. Grandfather Emperor and the others are also receiving them." Yin Xiaoting shook his head and said, "Grandpa Emperor?" Yin Wushuang seemed to be struggling. The imperial grandfather they were referring to was the retired emperor of the Yinyan dynasty. He was also the strongest person in the Yinyan dynasty, a top honorable one. "All right, I'll go," Yin Wushuang said coldly. "Shuang." Ji Ling bit her lips until they turned white. "Haha. That's more like it." Yin Xiaoting heaved a sigh of relief. If Yin Wushuang agreed, then all the difficulties would be easily solved. At this moment, in a dazzling reception hall, a young man dressed in a lavender robe was sitting leisurely on a wooden armchair. Beside him stood several attendants. If Yi Guqin were here, he would definitely be surprised. It was because the man in the lavender robe was none other than Yang Haoye, the 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty, whom he had met in the ancient Chaos Wasteland during his first mission at Sacred Cliff College. At that time, Yang Haoye, Su Jiqing, and the others were besieged by the deathworms, and Yi Guqin was the one who helped them out. Later on, Yang Haoye had bad intentions, and Yi Guqin took out the Sword Sun token, which almost scared Yang Haoye out of his wits. However, at this moment, Yang Haoye's attitude was frivolous, and the corners of his mouth curled up arrogantly as if he was superior to others. There was a group of people standing at the side, led by a yellow-haired old man. He was the retired emperor of the Yinyan dynasty and the grandfather of Yin Wushuang and the others, Yin He. Behind him was Yin Wushuang's father, the former master of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Yin Changge. Yin Xiaotong's father, the prince of the Yinyan dynasty, Yin Balin, was also there. In addition, Yin Feiling, who had been to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, was also in the group. It could be said that most of the important people in the Yinyan dynasty were gathered there. "Princess Wushuang hasn't arrived yet?" Yang Haoye's tone was slightly impatient. "8th prince, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but she should be here soon," Yin He said warmly. He was the retired emperor of a country, but at this moment he had to bow down. It was because Yang Haoye was the prince of the great Qian dynasty. He casually called a few servants, and they were all top supremacies who could compete with Yin He. Not to mention that there were more than 10 false saints in the great Qian dynasty. Such a status was not something that the Yinyan dynasty could provoke. Moreover, the crisis of the Fengni dynasty was approaching, and only with the help of the great Qian dynasty could the Yinyan dynasty tide over this crisis. Not long after, 3 figures walked in from outside the guest hall. It was Yin Wushuang, Ji Ling, and Yin Xiaoting. When he saw Yin Wushuang, Yang Haoye's eyes lit up. Yin Wushuang's face was exquisite, and her figure was curvy. In particular, her beautiful snow-white long legs were even more eye-catching. "Tsk, how enjoyable would it be to have those long legs wrapped around my waist?" Yang Haoye thought to himself, and his eyes could not help but reveal a lustful look. He liked women, and previously wanted to subdue Su Jiqing in the ancient Chaos Wasteland. In the end, Su Jiqing went with Yi Guqin. Later on, Yang Haoye accidentally saw Yin Wushuang, who was participating in the training in a secret realm. He was immediately attracted to her. After learning that the Fengni dynasty was about to attack the Yinyan dynasty, Yang Haoye directly came to the Yinyan dynasty, wanting to take Yin Wushuang as a concubine. Yin Wushuang saw the lustful look in Yang Haoye's eyes and frowned slightly. She forcefully suppressed the disgust in her heart and bowed slightly. "Wushuang greets the 8th prince." "Haha, Princess Wushuang, we'll be a family in the future, no need to be so formal," Yang Haoye said with a laugh. Yin Wushuang frowned and said, Wushuang doesn't know what the eighth prince means. Oh, you mean you're not willing to be this prince's concubine? Yang Haoya's smile faded, and his tone was slightly cold. The follower by the side berated loudly. How dare you, a mere princess of a small country? It's your honor to be fancied by His Highness, and you actually dare to refuse. The reprimand of the follower made the faces of Yan He and the rest turn ugly. No matter what, Yan Wushuang was still the princess of a country. How could she be reprimanded by a follower of Yang Haoya? Yan Chang'e took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. His current cultivation base had also reached the sixth heaven of venerable realm. Even so, it was still nothing in front of the great Qian dynasty. Yang Haoya crossed his legs and said indifferently, I also know the situation of your Yinyan dynasty, and I specially came to help you. As long as Princess Wushuang is willing to marry me, I'll settle the matter of the Fengni dynasty for you. Yang Haoya waved his hand, appearing rather domineering. The eyes of Yin Balin, Yin Xiaotang, Yin Feiling, and the rest all lit up. They definitely did not want the Yinyan dynasty to be destroyed. If that happened, they would not have a good ending. The price of obtaining the help of the great Qian dynasty was only to let Yin Wushuang marry over as a concubine. In their opinion, this kind of transaction was too worth it. Even the Grand Emperor Yan He's old face revealed hesitation. Logically speaking, he definitely did not want his granddaughter to suffer. However, compared to the entire Yinyan dynasty, Yin Wushuang's happiness was insignificant. Chapter 1199. Many members of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's imperial family turned to look at Yin Wushuang. Their eyes were filled with hope and eagerness. The only way now was for Yin Wushuang to agree to Yang Haoya's request. Only Yan Chang'e, Jiling, and the others had tense expressions. They couldn't bear it. The entire Swallow Cloud dynasty had to sacrifice a girl's happiness to save it. It was a little sad. But this was how the world worked. The strong were respected. With strength and background, one could do whatever they wanted. Yang Haoya looked at Yin Wushuang playfully. With his status, he could use forceful methods to force Yin Wushuang. But that would be too boring. Yang Haoya loved to see those women submit to his humiliation, even though they didn't want to. Yin Wushuang clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. An extremely conflicted expression appeared on her face. After Yi Guqin, she hadn't met another man who could move her heart. But her father, grandfather, and everyone from the Sword sect were all in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. If the Swallow Cloud dynasty was destroyed, these people would also die. Yin Wushuang definitely didn't want to see that. Yin Wushuang took a deep breath. Her chest rose and fell as she said with difficulty, Can you give me 3 days to consider? Yin Wushuang couldn't make a decision now. Yang Haoya frowned, but soon relaxed. All right, I'm not a stingy person. It's only 3 days. I can wait, but Yang Haoya changed the topic and continued. It's hard to say when the Phoenix Nya dynasty will attack. What he meant was that if Yin Wushuang kept delaying, it would be too late when the Phoenix Nya dynasty attacked. Hearing this, Yin Xiaotang and the others' expressions changed. They felt uneasy. After that, Yang Haoya and his entourage left. The atmosphere in the guest hall was oppressive and dead silent. Wushuang, it's all my fault. Yan Chang'e's face was filled with pain. The reason the Phoenix Nya dynasty started the war was because of Empress Feng Nya. She had always hated Yan Chang'e for abandoning her for an ordinary girl. After Yan Chang'e and the others returned to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Empress Feng Nya's hidden hatred was once again aroused. That was why she decided to attack the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Father, there's no need to say any more. This has nothing to do with you. Yin Wushuang forced a smile. Shuang, our Swallow Cloud dynasty is too weak. That's why we have to rely on you. Yin He's old face was filled with shame. Yin Balin continued. Niece, you must be more open-minded. The survival of the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty depends on your choice. The life and death of a dynasty rested on the happiness of a young girl. How absurd was that? Shuang knows. Let me be alone for a while. Yin Wushuang turned around and left. Her back view was somewhat desolate. Shuang, Jiling's eyes reddened. who knew how much Yan Wushuang had endured. Just as the entire Swallow Cloud Imperial family was in a gloomy mood, Yi Guqin, Mu Xingzu, and Lin Tu finally arrived at Yin capital on a flying boat. They landed outside Yindu. Yi Guqin put on a devil mask, a black cloak, and a hood. Mu Xingzu also put on a silver mask. Lin Tu quietly followed beside them. After entering Yindu, Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu didn't immediately go to the palace. Instead, they found a restaurant. They had also heard that Fengni dynasty was going to attack Swallow Cloud dynasty. So that's how it is. Yi Guqin finally understood. He had passed by Fengni dynasty before, and saw that they had mobilized 1,000,000 troops. He didn't expect them to attack Swallow Cloud dynasty. Thank goodness we came. Otherwise, senior sister and the others would be in danger. Mu Xingzu patted her small chest, still a little scared. Yi Guqin also sighed. Fortunately, he had listened to Mu Xingzu's words and came to Swallow Cloud dynasty. Otherwise, the next time he came, Swallow Cloud dynasty would have been a pile of ruins. At this moment, someone at the side table whispered, "I wonder if Princess Wushuang will marry the 8th prince this time." Probably. After all, Swallow Cloud dynasty can only survive by relying on Great Qian dynasty. Sigh, it's a pity that Princess Wushuang has to marry such a person. Someone sighed, feeling pity for Yan Wushuang. The 8th prince of Great Qian dynasty? Yi Guqin frowned under the devil mask. If he remembered correctly, the 8th prince of Great Qian dynasty was Yang Haoye, whom he had met during a mission in ancient Chaos Wasteland. He didn't expect Yang Haoye to target Yan Wushuang. This made Yi Guqin's face turn cold. He's too much. How dare he force senior sister? How despicable. Mu Xingzu was also furious. Yang Haoye was obviously using Fengni dynasty to force Yan Wushuang to marry him. This made Mu Xingzu extremely disgusted. However, at this moment, a group of people walked up to the restaurant. Everyone in the restaurant looked over and was immediately stunned. They hurriedly shut their mouths with shock in their eyes. The person in the lead was Yang Haoye, who was dressed in a light purple robe. He was followed by his entourage. Yang Haoye and the others took their seats. Seeing this, the rest of the people around them hurriedly got up and walked downstairs, not daring to stay beside Yang Haoye for a second. Only Yi Guqin and the other two remained seated calmly. Yang Haoye didn't notice Yi Guqin and the others as he took a sip of wine alone. One of the entourage at the side sucked up to him and said, "Yan Wushuang is really insensible. It should be her honor that your highness wants to take her as a concubine. She actually declined." Yang Haoye swirled the wine in his glass and sneered, "It's normal. She wants to pretend to be a chaste woman. I've seen many women like her, but in the end, didn't they still obediently submit to me?" Hearing these words, Yi Guqin, who was seated in the corner, gradually had a cold gaze in his eyes. A trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. The entourage continued to ask, "Your Highness, what if Yan Wushuang still refuses after 3 days?" "If she still refuses, Yang Haoye's face was cold. "Then there's no need for the Fengni dynasty to do anything. I'll destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty first and slaughter her family and friends in front of her. Let's see if she surrenders or not." "Your Highness, you're so cunning." The entourage flattered. "Haha, of course, this is my last resort." Yang Haoye smiled casually. But at this moment, a low voice suddenly sounded. "Don't you think your thoughts are too vicious?" Yang Haoye raised his eyebrows. Only then did he notice the 3 figures in the corner. He vaguely felt that he had heard this voice somewhere before, but after thinking carefully, he couldn't figure it out. Shaking his head slightly, Yang Haoye said coldly, "You're really unlucky to run into me when I'm in a bad mood." Yang Haoye held his wine glass and said coldly. The followers immediately understood and unleashed their auras. They were all Martial Highness realm experts. "How dare you displease His Highness? You lowly commoners are courting death." The followers of the Venerables shouted coldly and attacked Yi Guqin and the others together. Yang Haoye didn't pay attention to them at all and drank alone. At this moment, Lin Tu, who was sitting beside Yi Guqin, raised his hand with a cold expression. Puff, 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 puff. The entourage of the venerable experts directly exploded and turned into blood flowers. The sputtering blood sprayed all over Yang Haoye, and the wine in his glass turned blood red. Yang Haoye was stunned. His blood-stained face froze and his pupils shrank to the size of a needle. Even his breathing seemed to have stopped. Chapter 1200. Yang Haoye's body was stained with warm blood. His face instantly froze, and his hands trembled. The wine glasses in his hands slipped to the ground, shattering into pieces. You. Yang Haoye's body trembled, and his face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. To be able to kill several sovereigns with one slap, that person's strength was absolutely unfathomable. Yi Guqin indifferently stood up and walked towards Yang Haoye. You. Who are you? I'm the 8th prince of the Great Qian Empire, Yang Haoye. Yang Haoye's legs went soft, and he collapsed to the ground with a plop. He kept moving backwards. It wasn't that he didn't dare to resist, but he knew that with the person's strength he couldn't resist. His cultivation was only at the divine dwelling stage, and he wasn't even a sovereign. There was no way he could escape. Therefore, Yang Haoye could only bring out his identity and background, hoping to make the other party afraid. You really don't change. Yi Guqin sneered. Yang Haoye had provoked him in the ancient chaos wasteland. He didn't expect Yang Haoye to bump into the muzzle of his gun again. You know me. Yang Haoye suddenly reacted, and then he seemed to remember something when he heard Yi Guqin's voice. Yi Guqin raised his head slightly, revealing the ghost mask under his hood. When he saw the mask, Yang Haoye's face tightened, and then he sucked in a breath as if he suddenly remembered something. He couldn't help but speak in a trembling voice. You are the Sword Dynasty's. Dugu. That's right, I didn't expect to bump into you again after letting you go last time. What a coincidence. Yi Guqin smiled faintly, but that smile was very cold. Yang Haoye's heart sank to the bottom. Given the Great Qian Empire's information channels, how could they not know what had happened in the Sword Dynasty, including the fact that Yi Guqin had become the new Jiankui? However, Yang Haoye could not understand why the high and mighty Sword Dynasty's Jiankui would appear in a small place like the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. Duguwu Bai. No. Lord Jiankui, please spare me this time, I'll leave immediately. Yang Haoye was not a fool. He knew that Yi Guqin might have some sort of relationship with the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, so he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Yang Haoye, who had been incomparably arrogant in Swallow Cloud Imperial Palace, was now kowtowing nonstop in fear. If Yan He and the other members of the Swallow Cloud Imperial family saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked. However, compared to the identity of Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty, Yang Haoye's identity as the 8th prince of the Great Qian Dynasty was really nothing. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with coldness. The last time he held back, he allowed Yang Haoye to almost harm Yan Wushuang. This time, he naturally wouldn't make the same mistake. Sensing the murderous intent in Yi Guqin's voice, Yang Haoye shouted in fear. You can't kill me. I'm a prince of the Great Qian Dynasty. If you kill me, my father, the Great Qian Emperor, will not let you off. It's useless to use anyone as a shield. Yi Guqin raised his hand and his true energy surged out. He used his fingers as a sword, pointing one to the sky and the other to the ground. Then, he clasped his hands together, and a terrifying golden sword aura was brewing in his palms. Then he swept out with his finger. A golden sword light that was 100 feet long lit up the sky. The incomparably ferocious golden sword radiance swept towards Yang Haoye. No. Yang Haoye only had time to say one word before his body was annihilated by the golden sword light, exploding into a cloud of blood and dust. That golden sword ray was simply too powerful. It was so powerful that it split the entire restaurant in two. The golden light shone and the entire Swallow capital could see it clearly. What's that? Such a phenomenon shook the imperial palace. Yan Wushuang leaned against the tall building alone, and her heart was in knots. At this moment, she also saw the dazzling golden sword ray cut through the dark clouds in the sky. Yan Wushuang was stunned. She did not know why, but when she saw the golden sword light, she actually had a special feeling of palpitation. Without any hesitation, Yin Wushuang moved her slender legs and her delicate body flashed out. Many people in the imperial palace were also alarmed and hurried to the scene of the incident. After killing Yang Haoye in the restaurant, Yi Guchen's expression did not change at all. It was just a prince. It was not a big deal to kill him. Moreover, he did deserve to be killed. The commotion is a little too big. Xingzhu, I'll leave for a while, Yi Guchen said. Mu Xingzhu nodded slightly. Then Lin Tu and Yi Guchen flashed out while Mu Xingzhu stayed where she was. This was because she wanted to meet her senior brothers and sisters in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. After a while, the sound of wind whistling could be heard. It was some guards of the imperial palace. Among them, there were even a few familiar figures. Chu Qingqi, who was dressed in green, and Yi Xie were all senior disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. After coming to the Yanyan dynasty, they joined the royal family. Those are the corpses of the great Qian dynasty prince's followers? Chu Qingqi was shocked when he saw some broken limbs on the ground. Who killed them? Yi Xie's expression changed. The 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty had died in the capital of the Yanyan dynasty. If word got out, the Yanyan dynasty would never be able to clear their name. At this moment, they finally noticed the petite girl who was wearing a silver mask. You are. Chu Qingqi's expression froze. At this moment, Yin Xiaoteng, Jiling, and Yin Wushuang also arrived. Seeing the scene in front of him, Yin Xiaoteng's heart skipped a beat and he almost fainted. The 8th prince is dead? Jiling was also stunned, but there was a trace of joy in her eyes. Yin Wushuang's pupils also trembled. She knew very well what the 8th prince's death meant. The 8th prince's death seems to be related to this person. Chu Qingqi pointed at the masked figure. You are. Yin Wushuang also looked over. He, senior sister, long time no see. That person took off the mask on her face, revealing a fair and pretty face. Her eyebrows were curved, and her big eyes were twinkling with a smile. You are. Junior sister Mu? Yin Wushuang was stunned. Jiling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and the others were also stunned. Then joy appeared on their faces. They did not expect to meet an old friend again. Next, they exchanged greetings and sighed. Jiling tactfully told Mu Xingzhu what happened to Yi Guchen in the Tianhuang Plains, but Mu Xingzhu did not know. Mu Xingzhu rolled her eyes and giggled, but she did not say anything. Yin Xiaoteng interrupted with a pale face. Why are you still reminiscing at this time? This girl is very likely related to the 8th prince's death. Jiling asked. Junior sister Mu, did you really kill the 8th prince? Mu Xingzhu rolled her eyes and said. A friend of Xingzhu's killed him. He couldn't stand Yang Haoye's character, so he killed him directly. What a friend! Yin Wushuang and the others were shocked. What kind of friend did Mu Xingzhu make that he dared to kill the 8th prince of Great Qian so casually? Chapter 1201. You will know in the future. Mu Xingzhu said casually. She also knew that the news that Yi Guchen was still alive could not be leaked out. Otherwise, Yi Guchen and the Sword Dynasty would be pressured by the 3 overlord forces. Where is your friend? Ask him to come out. The Yanyan Dynasty can't bear the death of the 8th prince. Yin Xiaoteng said coldly with an ugly expression. If the matter was not resolved, the emperor of the Great Qian Dynasty would definitely vent his anger on the Yanyan Dynasty. By then, it would be the other 2 top dynasties that would attack the Yanyan Dynasty. Isn't it just the Great Qian Dynasty? What can happen? Mu Xingzhu pursed her lips and did not take it seriously. Perhaps it was because she had become the sword son of the Sword Dynasty. Mu Xingzhu's horizons had also been broadened. The Great Qian Dynasty was not enough to scare her. Yin Xiaoteng was so angry that he laughed. The Great Qian Dynasty is nothing. How can you say that? Your friend killed the 8th prince and now he doesn't dare to come out. Do you want the Yanyan Dynasty to take the blame? Enough, cousin, shut up. Yin Wushuang reprimanded. Those who did not know would think that Yin Xiaoteng was from the Great Qian Dynasty. Cousin Wushuang, what do you know? The Yanyan Dynasty is completely destroyed because of her and her friend. Yin Xiaoteng swung his sleeves and left angrily. In his opinion, it would not be long before the entire Yanyan Dynasty was destroyed. I'm sorry, junior sister Mu. Yan Wushuang said apologetically. It's okay, senior brothers and senior sisters, let's find a place to talk. Mu Xingzu looked relaxed and happy. Looking at Mu Xingzu's expression, Chu Qingqi and the rest fell into deep thought. Did Mu Xingzu really have someone to rely on? As for Mu Xingzu's Sword Sun mask, because there were many cultivators who wore masks, and with the Swallow Cloud dynasty's level, it was difficult for them to come into contact with the Sword dynasty, so they did not recognize Mu Xingzu's mask. After that, Mu Xingzu, Yan Wushuang, and the others also left the collapsed restaurant. On the roof of another building, Yi Guchen stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Beneath his mask, his gaze was fixed on Yan Wushuang, Jiling, and the others. Everyone, now is not the time to meet you. After the battle of heaven's favorites, I will drink with you, Yi Guchen murmured. On the other side, Yan Wushuang seemed to have sensed something, and she suddenly turned around and looked into the distance. But there was nothing there. Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly as a self-mocking smile appeared on her face. It had been a year, and her misconceptions had increased. She always felt that the young man would come back to find her. However, it was just disappointment after disappointment. Soon, the news of the death of the 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty spread throughout the entire Yan capital. When Grand Emperor Yan He heard the news, he almost fainted from anger. Yan Bailin even wanted to capture Mu Xingzu and interrogate her, but Yan Chang'e vehemently opposed it. After all, Mu Xingzu was once a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda, and he was the sect master of the Sword Sect Pagoda. He had no reason not to protect Mu Xingzu's safety. Then a few days later, another piece of bad news came. The million-strong army of the Fengni dynasty had been reorganized. Empress Fengni personally led an expedition to destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. At the same time, in the palace of the Great Qian dynasty, an earth-shattering roar was heard. A middle-aged man in a dragon python imperial robe had an extremely cold expression. He clapped his hand, and the dragon chair he was sitting on silently turned to dust. This middle-aged man was the Great Qian dynasty's Emperor Qian, a powerful false saint expert. Little 8th died in the Swallow Cloud dynasty? Emperor Qian asked in a gloomy tone. That's right, the servant below said. Did the Swallow Cloud dynasty not give an explanation? Emperor Qian asked coldly. No, they didn't search for the person who killed His Highness. They didn't find anything either. Well, how dare a puny Swallow Cloud dynasty look down on the Great Qian dynasty? Emperor Qian was so angry that he laughed, his voice shaking the entire palace. Where are the 4 directions heavenly guards? Your subordinate is here. For strong false divine breaths burst out. Like fire beacons, for figures in iron armor appeared. Come with me and destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Emperor Qian's voice boomed like thunder. He stepped into the sky with great momentum. Emperor Qian's action wasn't because Yang Haolia was important to him. After all, he had too many children, and Yang Haolia wasn't that outstanding. Emperor Qian was angry because of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's disrespect to the Great Qian dynasty. Emperor Qian and the 4 heavenly guards, a total of 5 false saints, set out together. In addition, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers with them, ready to destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In Emperor Qian's opinion, destroying a high-tier dynasty was as easy as eating and drinking. Once he destroyed the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty would naturally fall. At the same time, millions of soldiers formed a mighty flood of steel from the Phoenix Nia dynasty's direction, and headed toward the Swallow Cloud dynasty. A phoenix chariot rose high into the sky, and inside it sat a peerlessly beautiful figure. It was Empress Feng Nia, who was preparing to personally lead the troops. Suddenly, a fiery red figure blocked in front of the carriage. That was a young lady of outstanding beauty. She wore a red muslin dress, and her face was tender and charming. The flame-like phoenix mark on her forehead gave her a sense of mystery and nobility. If Yi Guchen was here, he would definitely recognize this girl. It was Princess Fengxi. Mother, do you really want to do this? Princess Fengxi bit her red lips. Fengxi, what are you doing? Empress Feng Ye frowned. Her facial features were charming and she exuded a sense of majesty. Empress Fengye was also a powerful false saint expert. Mother, let bygones be bygones. There's no need to keep harping on it, Princess Fengxi persuaded. Empress Fengye sneered. He made me lose face back then, and I can't take it lying down. It's fine if he hides like a mouse, but since he dares to return to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, he must be prepared to pay the price. But mother, you've already forced that woman to her death. We're even now, Princess Fengxi said. Move aside. I will personally destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty, and make that heartless Yen Chang'e regret rejecting me back then. Empress Fengye barked. An aura exploded and pushed Princess Fengxi away. The army then pointed their swords at the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Mother! Princess Fengxi murmured. Originally, she was filled with hostility toward Yen Chang'e and Yen Wuxia like Empress Fengye. But after going to the Saint Origin dynasty and interacting with Yi Guqin, Yen Wuxia, and the others, her hostility had unknowingly dissipated. This was why Princess Fengxi wanted to persuade Empress Fengye. However, Empress Fengye was still too stubborn. When a woman was stubborn, she could be even crazier than a man. Sigh. Princess Fengxi sighed deeply, and also got on a carriage to follow. As the news of the Great Gan dynasty and Phoenix Nye dynasty's army spread, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty was in chaos. The Swallow capital was also in a state of panic. Yen He, Yen Chang'e, Yen Balin, and the others had heavy expressions. Even Yen Xiaotang and the others were prepared to flee. After all, who could stop two top-tier dynasties? At the very least, the Swallow Cloud dynasty wouldn't be able to. At this critical moment, the Swallow Cloud dynasty was about to collapse. Yi Guqin clasped his hands behind his back and stood on top of a pavilion. Two top-tier dynasties attacking together? They really think highly of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Yi Guqin sneered. Lin Tu frowned slightly. Jian Kuei, the Great Gan Emperor, and Empress Fengye are both very strong false saints. I'm afraid I won't be able to deal with them alone. Although Lin Tu was a false saint, his strength wasn't at the top. Not to mention that the Great Gan Emperor and Empress Fengye wouldn't be the only two false saints. Just the Great Gan dynasty alone had 5 false saints, including the Great Gan Emperor. Yi Guqin smiled faintly and took out a communication jade. Brother Lung, isn't it a bit boring staying in the Sword dynasty? Do you want to come out for a walk? The corner of Lin Tu's eyes twitched when he heard Yi Guqin's message. In the entire Sword dynasty, Yi Guqin was probably the only one who could invite the solitary Cloud Sword Saint. TSK, these two dynasties are going to be in big trouble. Lin Tu shook his head and smiled. Chapter 1202. With the Qian Emperor and Empress Fengye personally leading the expedition, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty fell into unprecedented chaos. It even attracted the attention of the surrounding dynasties. To the outside world, the Swallow Cloud dynasty would definitely not be able to escape this time. The strength of the two sides was not equal at all. As time passed, the armies of the two top dynasties entered the Swallow Cloud dynasty's territory without any obstructions, heading straight for the Swallow capital. At this moment, on the city walls of the Swallow capital, Grand Emperor Yen He, Yen Chang'e, Yen Balin, Yen Xiaotang, and Yen Wuxia were all there. Elder Qing He Jiling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and the others from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were also there. Mu Xingzhu was also standing beside Yen Wuxia. Aside from Mu Xingzhu, who had a relaxed expression on her face, the rest of the people looked extremely solemn. It's over. I'm really done for this time. Yen Xiaotang's face was as pale as paper. It wasn't that he didn't want to escape, but no egg would remain intact when the nest was overturned. Even if he escaped, he wouldn't be able to escape anywhere. He would either die or be enslaved in the end. Yen Wuxia took a deep breath as her beautiful chest heaved up and down. She said to Yen He, Royal Grandfather, the great Qian dynasty's matter is ultimately because of Shuang. Shuang is willing to use her life to appease the Qian Emperor's anger. Yen Wuxia didn't ask Mu Xingzhu or her friend to take the blame. Instead, she was willing to take the blame herself. That's impossible. Yen He shook his head. How could he possibly send his granddaughter to her death? Let me go. Empress Fengye personally led the expedition just to target me and make me regret. Yan Chang's face was filled with vicissitudes as he sighed. In the end, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's calamity was caused by him. Looking at Yan Chang'e and Yan Wushuang, the father and daughter, offered themselves to him. He clenched his shriveled hands tightly. He felt resentment, powerlessness, and more than anything else, unwillingness. Because the Swallow Cloud dynasty was a small country, they couldn't resist at all, and could only be swallowed by the top dynasties. No need to say any more. No matter what happens, we'll just have to deal with it. At most, we'll just die. He had gotten over it. Since the end result was the same, why not be more carefree? Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others were pale? They definitely did not want to die. Mu Xingzu said, "Don't worry, the Swallow Cloud dynasty will be fine this time." With the protection of the Sword dynasty's Jiankuei Yi Guqin, nothing could happen to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. When Yan Xiaotang heard this, he could not bear to listen any longer. With reddened eyes he shouted, "You still dare to say that? If it wasn't for your friend who killed the 8th prince of Great Qian, would our Swallow Cloud Empire be forced into such a situation? He's just a prince with a bad character, and he even wanted to covet senior sister Yan. So what if I killed him?" Mu Xingzu shrugged her shoulders with a look of indifference. What shameless boasting. Yan Xiaotang's face was ashen, and he didn't say anything else. Then the atmosphere became so oppressive that it was suffocating. Right at this moment, a dark mass of people appeared in the distance. It was as if they had drowned the horizon. "He's here." Everyone from the royal family of Swallow Cloud was on high alert. In the distant horizon, a mighty army was rushing over with a majestic aura that shook the heavens. The whole world seemed to be shrouded in an austere atmosphere of golden spears and armored horses. The dark mass of the army came from 2 different directions. One side had a large number of people, about 1 million. It was the million-strong army of the Fengni dynasty. The other side only had a few 100,000 people, but their aura was also shocking and carried with it a conquering battle intent. Of course, the army was not the most important. The most important thing was that there were top experts. Above the army of the Fengni dynasty, a phoenix carriage crossed the void. Although the person did not appear, the powerful aura had already covered the entire Swallow capital. There was no need to say much about who was sitting in the phoenix carriage. In addition, there were 2 false saints from the Fengni dynasty. On the other side, above the army of the Great Qian dynasty, Emperor Qian and his 4 heavenly guards stood on a golden dragon boat. They were like the sun in the sky, and their aura shook the world. Is that the power of a false saint? On the Swallow Cloud Empire's side, panic and despair rose in their hearts. He seemed to have aged more than 10 years in an instant, and his old face was filled with sorrow. There were 5 false saints from the Great Qian dynasty, and 3 from the Fengni dynasty. A total of 8 false saints had arrived, and their aura shook the world. The entire Yan capital was like a piece of paper in front of the 8 false saints. It could be said that among the people on the city wall, only Mu Xingzu's expression did not change at all, because she had seen even more soul-stirring scenes. In the previous battle of the Sword dynasty, even 3 heavenly tribulation saints had appeared. In comparison, the current situation seemed like a piece of cake. "Swallow Cloud Empire, how dare you?" Emperor Qian roared, and his voice was loud and clear, spreading across heaven and earth. "Please forgive us, Emperor Qian." He bowed. Seeing this, Yan Wushuang bit her lips and stepped forward. "Emperor Qian, it's all because of me. I'm willing to repay Yang Haoya's life with my own." Emperor Qian said coldly, "Do you think you're worthy?" "I want the entire Swallow Cloud Empire to die with my son." Emperor Qian's words made everyone in the Swallow capital turn pale. Not only that, Empress Fengni of the Fengni dynasty walked out of her phoenix carriage. Her phoenix-like eyes immediately locked onto Yan Chang'e. Yan Chang'e's eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and his expression was complicated. Yan Wushuang's eyes, however, revealed a trace of hatred. It was this Empress Fengni who had forced her mother to death. Although Yan Wushuang had never seen her birth mother, it didn't mean that she didn't hate her. "Yan Chang'e, I'll ask you now, do you regret marrying that woman?" Empress Fengni asked, her voice as cold as ice. Yan Chang'e sighed deeply and looked at Yan Wushuang. The corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows resembled her mother's. She was a woman of ordinary birth, but had a tenacious personality and was dedicated to love. Yan Chang'e's lips curled into a happy smile as he looked at Empress Fengni. I'm sorry for what happened back then, but I, Yan Chang'e, have no regrets. Boom. Empress Fengni's aura exploded as Yan Chang'e spoke. She was furious. Alright, since that's the case, I'll let you meet that bitch. Listen up, soldiers of Fengni kill. Empress Fengni waved her jade-like arm. The million-strong army charged forward with great momentum. Mother! Princess Fengxi bit her lip, unable to bear it. On the other side, Emperor Qian also said indifferently, there's no need for the Swallow Cloud Empire to exist anymore. Today we'll destroy it. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the great Qian dynasty advanced toward the Swallow capital. Emperor Qian, Empress Fengni, and the other false saints moved, wanting to kill the Swallow Cloud Empire's imperial family. Seeing this scene, everyone on the city walls had bitter expressions on their faces, feeling helpless in their hearts. They didn't even need to resist because they didn't even have the strength to do so. However, just as the false saints and the million-strong army were about to raze the Swallow capital to the ground, the sonorous sound of a zither suddenly rang out. Chapter 1203. The sound of the zither pierced through metal and stone like a heavenly sword piercing through the heavens. All of the millions of soldiers who didn't have a high cultivation base immediately felt a headache when they heard the sound of the zither. Their movements slowed down. Who is it? Empress Fengni and Emperor Qian sensed it at the same time and stopped in their tracks. Could there be another expert in Swallow capital? It wasn't just Empress Fengni and Emperor Qian. Even Yan He, Yan Wushuang, and the others were shocked. Someone was playing the zither at such a critical moment? Only Mu Xingzu's eyes lit up when she heard the sonorous sound of the zither. She thought to herself, is Master finally making a move? A figure was sitting cross-legged in the sky. The figure was wearing a black cloak and was sitting cross-legged. A zither was placed in front of him. At that moment, the figure was playing the zither with his hands. A terrifying sword concept surrounded him, and it resonated with the sound of the zither. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked. That was because this scene was truly unexpected. The Swallow capital was on the brink of destruction. Millions of soldiers surrounded the Swallow capital. 8 false saints wanted to raze the Swallow capital to the ground. At such a critical moment, someone was sitting cross-legged in the sky and playing the zither. A million soldiers were in front of him, but his expression did not change. What kind of heroic spirit was this? Who is that? Yan Feiling covered her mouth, her face full of astonishment. Could it be the person who killed the 8th prince of Great Qian? Yan Shouting thought about it and exclaimed. That was the only explanation that made sense. That is, for some reason, Yan Wushuang felt an inexplicable throbbing in her heart when she saw that figure. It was as if her heartstrings were being tugged. Is that your friend? Ji Ling asked Mu Xingzu curiously. Mu Xingzu smiled and nodded. Even Yan He and the others were shocked. However, Yan He's eyes dimmed when he sensed the fluctuation of the figure's cultivation. The figure sitting cross-legged in the 9th heaven playing the zither was none other than Yi Guqin. It was impossible for him to watch the Swallow Cloud Empire be destroyed by the 2 top empires. That was why he intervened. At this moment, Yi Guqin was playing the guqin, infusing his sword will into the music, shaking the spiritual sea and divine soul of the million-strong army. The song Yi Guqin played was a famous song from his previous life, Ode to the Chivalrous Man. The sound of the zither was like a sword, sonorous and resonating. It was as if a chivalrous hero had broken the world with his sword. Empress Fengni frowned and coldly shouted, "Who are you?" Not far away, Princess Fengxi also stared at Yi Guqin in astonishment. To think that someone would dare to stand in front of Yan Du at such a critical juncture. How much courage did that require? The Qian Emperor swept his gaze across. When he sensed that Yi Guqin's cultivation wasn't high and hadn't even reached the honorable realm, he couldn't help but sneer. A person with a low cultivation and deliberately mystifying tricks dares to block the great Qian dynasty's army? What a joke! As soon as Emperor Qian finished speaking, his pseudo-saint aura burst out and pressed down on Yi Guqin with one hand. Not good. Seeing this scene, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others' faces changed. However, Yi Guqin didn't seem to notice the Qian emperor's attack and continued playing the zither. He seemed to have entered some kind of epiphany, and the sound of the zither became even more majestic. Deliberately mystifying tricks die. Emperor Qian pressed down with one hand, as if he was swatting a fly. He wanted to kill Yi Guqin. At this moment, a figure soared into the sky from Yendu and collided with Emperor Qian's move. Terrifying real qi ripples burst out like a sudden clap of thunder. A pseudo-saint expert. Emperor Qian was surprised. Yan He and the others from the Swallow Cloud imperial family were also stunned. Since when did a pseudo-saint expert arrive in Yendu? The appearance of a pseudo-saint expert shocked everyone. Even Empress Feng Ye was surprised. Pseudo-saint experts weren't cabbages that could be found on the streets. As long as a dynasty had a pseudo-saint expert, it could become a top dynasty. From this, one could see how rare and powerful they were. This pseudo-saint expert was naturally Lin Tu, who had followed Yi Guqin to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. At this moment he said coldly, "If anyone dares to interfere, don't blame me for being merciless." Lin Tu stood beside Yi Guqin like a servant. This made Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Ye even more shocked. Why did a pseudo-saint expert feel like a servant? On the city walls of Yendu, Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others widened their eyes and gasped in disbelief. That mysterious person actually had a pseudo-saint expert as a servant? Your friend, where did he come from? Yan Xiaotang stammered as he asked Mu Xingzu with lingering fear. Back then he had wanted to capture him and bring him to the great Qian dynasty as punishment. Now that he thought about it, he was covered in cold sweat. You'll know soon. Mu Xingzu couldn't be bothered to say anything more to a spineless person like Yan Xiaotang. Ji Ling's eyes lit up. How generous. To have a pseudo-saint expert as a servant, his background must be extraordinary. Yan Wushuang's gaze never left that figure from the beginning until the end. She had a vague intuition, but she didn't dare to believe it. She was afraid that it was all just an illusion. At this moment, Yi Guqin didn't care about anything else, because he had touched upon an opportunity to gain enlightenment. The sound of the zither was sonorous and impassioned, like a swordsman from ancient times who traveled to the ends of the world with his sword. At the same time, a mysterious sword intent was released from the zither. The million soldiers suddenly realized that the swords in their scabbards were trembling involuntarily, as if they were bowing to the Emperor of Swords. That's man and sword becoming one. No, could it be? Even Lin Tu, a pseudo-saint expert, sensed the intent emanating from Yi Guqin. That intent had gradually surpassed the realm of man and sword becoming one, and was moving towards the realm of man and heaven becoming one. At a certain moment, Yi Guqin plucked the zither. The wind and clouds changed colors, and heaven and earth resonated. Whoosh! Among the million soldiers of the two dynasties, as long as it was a sword, it would tremble violently and then soar into the sky. Hundreds of thousands of swords circled above the 9 heavens following Yi Guqin's zither music. Heaven and earth resonated, and the firmament shook. This scene caused everyone to cry out involuntarily with shock. Yan He and the others were shocked. Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others were shocked. Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and the others also felt their blood rush to their heads. This was because they seemed to have seen this scene before. Back in the Tianhuang Plains, Feng Manlu had risked his life to fight and used man and heaven becoming one. That time it was the same. The sword pointed to the sky, and tens of thousands of swords bowed. Who would listen to the song of a swordsman? Head held high for thousands of miles, unparalleled in the world. Yi Guqin waved his hands, and the sound of the zither reached its peak. The hundreds of thousands of swords turned upside down and swept out in all directions like a storm. Heaven and earth turned into sword intent, and the universe was stirred up. The million soldiers were forced back at the same time. Their faces were pale, and blood gushed out of their mouths. Their consciousness seemed to be about to explode. The song of a swordsman had forced back 1,000,000 soldiers. Chapter 1204. There was an absolute silence between heaven and earth. The 1,000,000 soldiers who had been pushed back were pale, and had blood at the corners of their mouths. They looked at Yi Guchen, who was sitting cross-legged in the sky, with unprecedented fear in their eyes. A single note of the zither had resonated with heaven and earth. 10,000 swords had pushed back 1,000,000 soldiers. What kind of profound and terrifying sword realm was this? However, Yi Guchen was frowning slightly. As expected, it's still too difficult to reach the unity of heaven and man. Yi Guchen sighed inwardly. After this epiphany, his sword realm was only a fine line away from the unity of heaven and man. However, this fine line would be difficult to break through without a better opportunity. However, Yi Guchen wasn't greedy. He was already very satisfied with this improvement. At this moment, everyone on the walls of Yen capital was frozen. That was because Yi Guchen's performance just now was too shocking. Everyone was shocked. What a terrifying sword realm. He's probably not far from the unity of heaven and man, right? Chu Qingqi exclaimed. However, this scene reminded them of the tragic scene in Wind-Sweeping Tower, and the atmosphere fell silent for a moment. On the other side, Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nye were also surprised. Such high attainments in sword Dao and the protection of a false saint expert. Even they couldn't help but be wary. Who exactly are you? Emperor Qian asked coldly. Yi Guchen didn't answer, as if he couldn't be bothered with him. Emperor Qian's face darkened when he saw that he was ignored. He was the lord of the great Qian dynasty, a true saint expert. Although Yi Guchen's sword Dao realm was high, his cultivation base wasn't high, so Emperor Qian didn't fear him at all. What he cared about was whether Yi Guchen had any power behind him. Leave. The Swallow Cloud dynasty can't be destroyed, Lin Tu said indifferently. If the Sword Dynasty's Jian Kuei wanted to protect the Swallow Cloud dynasty, who would dare to destroy it? Humph, this empress is going to destroy Yin Yin today. Empress Feng Nie's face was cold. She swung her palm at the city walls. Lin Tu frowned and raised his hand to clash with Empress Feng Nie's. At the same time, Emperor Qian also moved. He raised his hand and reached out toward Yi Guchen. No matter what, I'll suppress you first. Emperor Qian said coldly. Yi Guchen's background indeed made him a little wary, so he didn't kill him. He wanted to suppress Yi Guchen before destroying the great Qian Empire. By then he believed that even if there were other forces behind Yi Guchen, they would not attack the great Qian Empire just because of a small country. Yi Guchen's expression under his mask was calm and unperturbed as he faced the approaching giant hand. In the face of a 1,000,000-strong army, his expression remained unchanged. Facing a false saint expert, he had no fear. The hearts of Yan Wushuang and the others rose to their throats at this moment. They knew that the figure was the only way to save the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Just as Emperor Qian's hand was about to grab Yi Guchen, an extremely cold voice rang out from the void. How dare you suppress the Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty? You're courting death. An icy sword aura broke through the void and pierced through the void, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding void. The sword qi slashed down on the Qian Emperor's outstretched arm. The sword swept across and blood splattered everywhere. Emperor Qian's arm was directly chopped off and sent flying. Blood flowed everywhere. Cough. The sudden intense pain caused Emperor Qian to groan. His face was pale as he held his severed arm, and looked at the void in the distance in horror. The void shattered as a black-robed, gray-haired figure broke through the void. His cold expression swept across the Qian Emperor, Empress Feng Nye, and the others. How dare you sneak attack His Majesty Qian Emperor? You're courting death. When the great Qian Empire's 4 heavenly guards saw that Emperor Qian's arm was severed, they immediately used their techniques to attack. No, stop. Emperor Qian's expression changed drastically. The reason for that was because he recognized who that gray-haired man was. He wasn't someone that the great Qian Empire could provoke. However, it was too late. The moment the 4 heavenly guards attacked, 4 icy sword auras condensed in the void. Splat. The 4 sword auras slashed down, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4 false saint-level heavenly guards were cleanly killed. This scene caused everyone's eyes to pop out of their sockets. How terrifying was his strength to kill false saint-level experts as if they were dogs. How is this possible? Empress Feng Ye's face paled. She, who had always been majestic and domineering, felt as if her heart was being squeezed by a hand. She almost couldn't breathe. Your Sword Saint Guyan? Empress Feng Ye and Emperor Qian asked in shock. If it were any other expert, they wouldn't have lost their composure. But who was Sword Saint Guyan? He was a heavenly tribulation saint, an extraordinary being. False saint-level experts like them weren't weak, but they were still like ants in front of a saint-level expert. More importantly, they'd heard what Leng Qianhen had said. The figure who'd sat cross-legged on the ninth heaven, played the zither, and repelled millions of soldiers was Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Everyone from the Swallow Cloud Empire was dumbfounded by this scene. They felt as if they were dreaming, and it was extremely unreal. A heavenly tribulation saint had appeared in front of them alive, and killed 4 false saint-level experts. Even the lofty Emperor Qian had lost an arm. What shocked Yan Wushuang and the others even more was that the person who'd saved them was the legendary Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. The Sword Dynasty was the top dynasty among the 100 great dynasties. Not only did they have a heavenly tribulation saint like Leng Qianhen, but they also had powerful half-step saint-level experts like the proud divine state. Even if the great Qian dynasty and Phoenix Nye dynasty worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for such a powerful dynasty. Your friend is Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty? Jiling, Chu Qingqi, and the others took a deep breath. Although the Sword Dynasty was very far away from them, they'd heard rumors about the Sword Dynasty. Yan Wushuang didn't look happy. Instead, she felt a bit disappointed. That figure wasn't the one she'd been thinking about day and night. After all, Yan Wushuang couldn't have imagined that Yi Guqin would have such a strange encounter and become Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. The probability of such a thing happening was too low, so Yan Wushuang instinctively ruled out the possibility of it being Yi Guqin. Yan Xiaotong's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He'd almost caught Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Your friend is Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Are you also? Yan Xiaotong swallowed and asked Mu Xingzu. Yes, I'm also the sword son of the Sword Dynasty. What's wrong? Mu Xingzu said nonchalantly. In her opinion, this identity wasn't something to brag about. Yan Xiaotong's legs gave out and he collapsed to the ground. He'd thought of the 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty as a lifesaver. In the end, Mu Xingzu and the others were the real big shots and saviors. His father, Yan Bailin, also looked unnatural. He'd almost given the order to capture Mu Xingzu and interrogate her, but Yan Changge stopped him in the end. Junior sister Mu, you've actually become the sword son of the Sword Dynasty? Jiling, Chu Qingqi, and the others were also in disbelief. That was the high and mighty 13th sword son of the Sword Dynasty. He had a noble status and looked down on all the other dynasties. I'm nothing. Jian Kuei is the real powerful one, Mu Xingzu said with a smile. Jiling, Chu Qingqi, and the others sighed. Yan Wushuang looked at the figure standing in the sky. That invincible aura reminded her of the unyielding figure who'd fought against Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haotian. How great would it be if it's really you? Yan Wushuang's eyes gradually became hazy, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Chapter 1205. Right now, Empress Feng Ye and Emperor Qian's expressions were ugly. They originally thought that destroying the Swallow Dynasty would be a piece of cake. But who would have thought that the Swallow Dynasty would receive help from the Sword Dynasty? How is this possible? How is the Swallow Dynasty related to the Sword Dynasty? Emperor Qian's heart trembled. Empress Feng Ye's face tightened. She couldn't believe it either. How was the Swallow Dynasty, which didn't even have a pseudo-saint expert, related to the Sword Dynasty, the #1 dynasty in the 100 great dynasties? Not to mention them, even Yan He, Yan Changge, and the others were confused. They didn't know why the Sword Dynasty would help the Swallow Dynasty. Even a heavenly tribulation saint had made an appearance. However, Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Ye knew that they wouldn't be able to destroy the Swallow Dynasty today. After this news spread, the Swallow Dynasty's status and influence would skyrocket. After all, even the Sword Dynasty had come out to protect the Swallow Dynasty. One could imagine that no other dynasty would dare to humiliate the Swallow Dynasty in the future. However, Empress Feng Ye wasn't willing to leave just like that. Sometimes a woman's obsession was so deep. Seeing that Empress Feng Ye still wasn't willing to give up, Leng Qianhen's eyes darkened. Since he was here, he naturally had to help Yi Guqin protect the Swallow Dynasty. Boom. Leng Qianhen raised his hand. He didn't even need to use his divine weapon. Instead, he used his fingers as a sword. A terrifying sword light swept across the sky, slashing toward Empress Feng Ye. Empress Feng Ye's expression changed. She felt a suffocating sword energy rushing toward her. She tried to block it, but she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her jade-like hands were cut by the sword energy. Mother! Princess Feng Xi's face was pale. She hurried forward and stood in front of Empress Feng Ye. Her beautiful eyes turned towards Yi Guqin, because she knew that the real mastermind was not Leng Qianhen, but the Sword Dynasty's Jian Kuei. Lord Jian Kuei, I hope you can be magnanimous and let my mother go. Princess Feng Xi bowed to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin sighed when he saw this. Who would have thought that the mysterious and noble young girl from back then would actually show such a humble attitude? This was the change brought about by status. However, on account of his friendship with Princess Feng Xi in the past, Yi Guqin wouldn't kill him. Yi Guqin directly transmitted his voice to Leng Qianhen. Leng Qianhen nodded and said, "You may leave. But remember, do not take a single step into the Swallow Cloud Dynasty's territory, or else." Leng Qianhen didn't finish his sentence, but everyone knew what the consequences would be. When retired Emperor Yan He heard this, his old face twitched slightly due to excitement. This sentence was the best guarantee for the Swallow Cloud Dynasty's safety. After all, the one who had said that was a true saint. Empress Feng Ye had completely given up. She knew that she no longer had a chance. Emperor Qian let out a deep breath. His eyes were filled with resentment. What? You're not convinced? Leng Qianhen noticed Emperor Qian's gaze. His tone was cold. No, of course not. Emperor Qian lowered his head and gritted his teeth. 4 heavenly guards were killed, and one of his arms was cut off. As a false saint, the emperor of the Great Gan Dynasty, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? However, he couldn't take revenge. He even had to lower his head and admit defeat. One could imagine how furious Emperor Qian was. It's all because of that Jian Kuei. Emperor Qian's heart was cold. If you don't have it, then get lost. Leng Qianhen's words shook heaven and earth. Millions of soldiers retreated. Their faces were pale, and their fighting spirit had long been exhausted. In the end, the armies of the Great Gan Dynasty and Phoenix Nye Dynasty retreated like the tide. Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nye could only leave. A majestic war of annihilation ended in such a dramatic manner. Everyone in the Swallow Cloud Dynasty's imperial family still felt like they were dreaming. They were all prepared to die, but they didn't expect such a turn of events. However, they all knew that the Swallow Cloud Dynasty was only able to survive because of Jian Kuei. When they thought of this, Yan He, Yan Chang'e, Yan Bailin, and Yan Wushuang all looked at the figure standing in the sky. Thank you, Sword Saint Guyun and Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, for your help. Yan He cupped his hands at Yi Guqin. Yan Wushuang also bowed at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin nodded and didn't say anything. Now wasn't the time to reveal his identity for a reunion. Yan Chang'e said, I wonder if we can have the honor of inviting Sword Saint Guyun and Jian Kuei for a reunion, so that the Swallow Cloud Dynasty can express our gratitude. Leng Qianhen shook his head and said, that won't be necessary. He didn't like crowds to begin with. This time, he had helped because of Yi Guqin. He actually had nothing to do with the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. Everyone in the Swallow Cloud Dynasty knew that Leng Qianhen couldn't have anything to do with them. Then the only possibility was Jian Kuei. However, they couldn't figure out what the Sword Dynasty's Jian Kuei had to do with the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. Many people looked at Mu Xingzu, thinking that it might be because of Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu didn't say anything because Yi Guqin had warned her not to say anything. Then Yi Guqin didn't say a word and turned to leave. Just like when he came, he didn't ask for anything in return, nor did he ask the Swallow Cloud Dynasty for anything in return. Tisk tsk. As expected of the sword leader of the first dynasty, a single tune of his zither caused 1,000,000 mighty soldiers to retreat, and he comes and goes as he pleases. How many people in the younger generation can compare to such bearing? Everyone in the Swallow capital sighed. In the next few days, the Swallow capital was decorated with lanterns and streamers to celebrate. Mu Xingzu also became a real VIP and received the best treatment. At night, outside the lively palace in the Swallow capital, Yan Wushuang walked out of the banquet with her slender and round legs to relax. The experience in the past few days was a bit of a roller coaster ride for her. At that moment, Yan Wushuang suddenly felt that someone was watching her. She took a step forward and walked gracefully. "Who is it?" Yan Wushuang shouted. She saw a figure standing on top of a fake mountain in front of her. He was wearing a black robe, and his black hair was fluttering in the night wind. He was wearing a ghost mask that seemed to be laughing and crying at the same time. Yan Wushuang's body froze as if she was struck by lightning. "Have you been watching me in the dark for the past few days?" Yan Wushuang's heart suddenly trembled. She didn't expect that the Sword Dynasty's Jian Kuei would be watching her in the dark. That figure was silent and didn't say a word. Yan Wushuang was so nervous that she almost stopped breathing because that figure was similar to the person she had been dreaming of. "Is it you?" Yan Wushuang's eyes were slightly hazy with tears, and the scene in front of her seemed to be blurry. That figure didn't say a word and disappeared into the night sky in a flash. Yan Wushuang's body trembled as she sat on the ground, feeling lost. On the other side, Yi Guchen slowly took off the ghost mask on his face in the sky where the moon was bright and the stars were few. Under the illumination of the moonlight, his handsome face revealed a hint of melancholy. "Shuang, see you in the battlefield of the prodigies." Chapter 1206. The matter in the Yinyan dynasty had come to an end for the time being. This matter had also caused quite a stir. After all, 4 false saints had fallen, and even the Qian emperor had lost an arm. After the news spread, the Yinyan dynasty, an ordinary high-tier dynasty, became the most untouchable existence. After staying in the Yan capital for a few days, Mu Xingzu also bid farewell. "Senior Sister Yan, will you participate in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides?" asked Mu Xingzu. "Yes." Yan Wushuang nodded slightly. In the past year, her cultivation had not lagged behind, and she had reached the divine dwelling stage. "Great, we'll meet again in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides. There might be a surprise then." Mu Xingzu smiled. "A surprise?" Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly. Ever since Yi Guchen had disappeared after consuming the 9 deaths no regrets pill, there was nothing that could be considered a surprise to her. After leaving the Yan capital, Mu Xingzu and Yi Guchen met up. "Are we really not going to meet Senior Sister Yan and the others? I feel that Senior Sister Yan has been very disappointed." Mu Xingzu hesitated. "We'll meet again when it's time. All right, let's go back." Yi Guchen waved his hand indifferently. They then boarded the flying boat and flew back to the Sword Dynasty. On the other side, in the palace of the great Qian dynasty, the Qian emperor sat on the dragon throne, and a group of princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty knelt before him. At this moment, the princes and princesses were filled with righteous indignation and were criticizing Yi Guchen. "Jian Kuei is too arrogant. He's just a cripple." "That's right. His divine dwelling was destroyed by Huang Qianqiu of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion. What right does a cripple have to be arrogant?" The princes and princesses all wanted to show off in front of the Qian emperor. "Enough!" the Qian emperor shouted coldly, silencing all the princes and princesses in the hall. "I now announce that whoever can kill Jian Kuei in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides will be the emperor of the great Qian dynasty." As soon as Emperor Qian finished speaking, the eyes of all the princes and princesses shone brightly. On the battlefield of geniuses, one's life and death depended on oneself. The forces behind one's back could not interfere. Moreover, the fact that Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty had his spiritual dwelling destroyed by Huang Qianqiu was no longer a secret. Many people knew about it. There were even people who mocked the Sword Dynasty for letting a cripple with a crippled divine dwelling take the position of Jian Kuei. Under these circumstances, the princes and princesses felt that they had a chance to eliminate Yi Guqin. Emperor Qian's eyes were filled with coldness. Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, I will take your life as compensation for this arm of mine. On the Feng Nie dynasty's side, Princess Feng Shi was also summoned by Empress Feng Nie. Find a chance to kill that Jian Kuei on the battlefield of prodigies, Empress Feng Nie said coldly. But Princess Feng Shi hesitated, because in her opinion, Empress Feng Nie was being too paranoid. There are no buts. You don't have to worry about anything on the battlefield of prodigies. Jian Kuei is just a cripple with a crippled divine dwelling. Even if you don't kill him, someone else will. Empress Feng Nie said coldly. Princess Feng Shi sighed inwardly and nodded. Although the incident in the Swallow Cloud dynasty had caused a stir, it wasn't a big deal and soon died down. However, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's reputation had soared because of this incident. No other dynasty dared to provoke the Swallow Cloud dynasty. And after this matter had passed, another even bigger matter swept through the entire South Horizon region, like a wildfire burning the plains. This major incident was naturally the opening of the Battlefield of Prodigies. The qualifiers for the Battlefield of Prodigies had started more than a year ago. The prodigies of the 100 great dynasties and various forces were all rubbing their fists and preparing for a big fight. It could be said that the Battlefield of Prodigies was the most dazzling stage in the South Horizon region. Only prodigies who performed well in the Battlefield of Prodigies were qualified to be taken in as disciples by the Overlord forces. All the prodigies wanted to join the Overlord forces no matter what. The reason was simple. The Overlord forces had a long history and controlled the richest resources in the South Horizon region. This was something that no dynasty could compare to. Even the Sword Dynasty, which was known as the #1 dynasty and the Holy Land of Sword Cultivators, couldn't compare with the Overlord forces. If a sword cultivator had to choose a place to cultivate the sword, he definitely wouldn't choose the Sword Dynasty. He would choose the Heavenly God Sword Sect or one of the 4 sword pavilions. Of course, there was another more important reason. Becoming a disciple of an Overlord force would give one face and confidence. The reason why Gu Xiaoyang could be so arrogant, and even Pei Tu didn't dare to go too far in the Mola dynasty, was because he had the Starry Sword Pavilion behind him. The reason why Di Haoyan could do whatever he wanted and even destroy the Su family was because he had the Heavenly God Sword Sect behind him. It could be said that an Overlord force was the biggest backer and the biggest deterrent. The reason why Yi Guqin wanted to join the Battlefield of Prodigies was because he needed a stable backer. Even though the Sword Dynasty was the #1 dynasty, it was still very stressful to deal with an Overlord force. Especially after Yi Guqin's identity was exposed. Because he had the immemorial demon sword, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. The Sword Dynasty couldn't protect him. Only an Overlord-level force would be able to intimidate his enemies and prevent them from doing as they pleased. On the way back to the Sword Dynasty, he was thinking about his future arrangements. Those forces that he had a grudge with or had enemies naturally couldn't join. This way he eliminated the Heavenly God Sword Sect, the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and the Dongfang family. The Battle God Saber Sect wasn't suitable for him. The Annihilation Demon Sect could let Duguqiu Emo test the waters. The Misty Sword Pavilion had Yi Songyue, which was a little troublesome. As for the Shimin clan, Nangong clan, Baiming clan and other clans, they were bloodline clans after all. They were far less eager to recruit disciples than the sections. As for the 3 hidden forces, the 1 mountain, 1 sea, and 1 immortal valley, they didn't take the initiative to recruit, and they rarely recruited geniuses from the outside world, so they could be excluded for the time being. Moreover, Yi Guqin had always had doubts about the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain. His relationship with the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain was a bit confusing. Therefore, Yi Guqin would never consider getting in touch with the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain before confirming their relationship. Therefore, after such a selection, Yi Guqin's only choice was the Luofu Sword Pavilion. Is the Luofu Sword Pavilion the only one left? I remember that it seems to be the sect that Jun Xiaoyao is from. Yi Guqin muttered to himself. He still hadn't forgotten that handsome young man in white who was as elegant as a celestial being. While Jun Xiaorao had only saved him once from Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Guqin had never forgotten the favor he had done for him. However, I can't be sure yet. I don't know what the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion's attitude is. Yi Guqin was very cautious. He couldn't choose to join the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion just because of Jun Xiaorao. Moreover, plans couldn't keep up with changes. Who knew what would happen on the battlefield of geniuses? Chapter 1207. After returning to the Sword Dynasty, Yi Guqin also began his final preparations for the battlefield of prodigies. Yi Guqin's name would reappear in the eyes of the world on the battlefield of prodigies. Yi Guqin, who had been forced into a corner in the Tianhuang Plains, would return with a towering rage and vengeance. When that time came, no one would dare to be high and mighty in front of Yi Guqin. As time passed, the day of the battlefield of prodigies finally drew near. A storm was brewing in the entire South Horizon region as a great change occurred. The various sects, empires, and factions all began to take action. Their target was the sacred city of fortune at the edge of the sacred emperor world. On the eve of the sacred emperor world's opening, the sacred city of fortune was clearly the most lively place. For a time, the Nantian region was in turmoil. The battle of prodigies was about to begin. On a majestic mountain peak in the War God dynasty, a group of people stood in a row. Among them, there were both men and women. Every one of them had a surging aura. However, two youths were the most eye-catching. One of them was a young man wearing platinum dragon-patterned armor. He was slender and handsome, and he held a golden spear in his hand. His aura was disdainful, and he was in high spirits. He was as vigorous as a white dragon, and his aura was vast. This was the son of the Heaven War Emperor, the first on the War God list, Zhao Shinkong. Zhao Shinkong was known as the Little War God in the War God dynasty. His cultivation was comparable to the prodigies of the overlord forces. Beside him was a young man wearing tiger-patterned black gold armor. He was tall and powerful, and he carried a tiger-headed golden spear on his back. His aura was not much weaker than Zhao Shinkong's. However, this young man's face was gloomy and cold, and his eyes were filled with bone-deep killing intent. This young man was the second on the War God list. His name was Zhao Weihuang. Of course, he also had another identity. He was the son of the Earth War Emperor. The Earth War Emperor had been killed by the proud divine continent in the battle against the Sword Dynasty. Because of this, one could imagine how Zhao Weihuang felt. He held great hatred and resentment towards the Sword Dynasty. The person he hated the most was not the proud divine continent who had killed the Earth War Emperor, but Yi Guqin. Because with his strength, he could not take revenge on the proud divine continent, so he could only vent his anger and hatred on Yi Guqin. If not for Yi Guqin saving the proud divine continent from the heavenless sword realm, it would have been impossible for the proud divine continent to have the chance to kill the Earth War Emperor. Therefore, Yi Guqin was the main culprit behind the Earth War Emperor's death. This was Zhao Weihuang's idea. In addition, Yi Guqin also knew some people in this group. For example, there was a 13-year-old girl who looked like she was carved out of jade. Her eyes were bright, and she had two ponytails behind her head. When she smiled, her small canine teeth would be revealed. She was Zhao Xiaodi, ranked 8th on the God of War list. She was also the daughter of the Heaven Battle Emperor and the younger sister of Zhao Shinkong. In addition, there was also the similarly gloomy and valiant young Marquis Zhongshan. His father, the heroic martial Marquis, also died in the War of the Sword Dynasty. There was also the 10th battle on the God of War list, undefeated. It could be said that the top 10 geniuses on the God of War list were all gathered here. At this moment, a golden sun suddenly appeared in the sky, emitting endless rays of light. However, if one looked closely, they would see a majestic and blurry figure within the sun. That majestic figure exuded a powerful aura, and the space around him was faintly distorted. Seeing this figure, all the geniuses present bowed and cupped their fists. "Greetings, Your Majesty." All the geniuses said. "Greetings, Father." Zhao Shinkong and Zhao Xiaodi also said. The figure wrapped in the sun was the leader of the God of War dynasty, the Heaven Battle Emperor. His strength was not only at the Sage Realm, but also at the Sage King Realm. Otherwise, how could he have the qualifications to lead the second strongest dynasty? This emperor only has one request for going to the battlefield of geniuses. The Heaven Battle Emperor paused, then said, "The 13 sword princes of the Sword Dynasty are all dead." His cold words resounded through the heavens and earth. Everyone present was stunned. The Heaven Battle Emperor wanted to kill all 13 sword princes of the Sword Dynasty in the sacred imperial realm. Because of the special rules of the battlefield of geniuses, the forces behind the geniuses could not interfere with the life and death of the geniuses. Therefore, the battlefield of geniuses was the cruelest battlefield for the geniuses of the various forces to kill each other. "I will not disappoint your majesty," Zhao Weihuang shouted, his murderous intent clear. If there was anyone who hated the Sword Dynasty the most, it would be Zhao Weihuang. "Jiankui, de Guwubai, I Zhao Weihuang, will personally take your head to appease my father's soul in heaven." Zhao Weihuang swore in his heart. Zhongshan and the other geniuses also had solemn expressions, their murderous intent surging. Zhao Shenkong did not have any deep-seated hatred for the Sword Dynasty, but he would do his best to carry out the Heaven Battle Emperor's orders. Among the geniuses present, only Zhao Xiaodi had a bitter expression, her eyes wide with worry, because in the sacred imperial realm, she had traveled together with Yi Guqin. Although they were not very close, they could be considered acquaintances. However, when they met again in the battlefield of geniuses, it would probably be a battle to the death between the two dynasties. What should Xiaodi do then? Zhao Xiaodi frowned. At the same time, the geniuses on the sword ranking of the Tyrant Sword Dynasty also received orders to kill the Sword Dynasty's geniuses if possible. This was to take revenge for the previous battle. After all, the Tyrant Sword Dynasty had also lost a saint, Hua Tianxiong. The princes and princesses of the Great Qian Dynasty were rubbing their palms, ready to go. They were planning how to kill Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty. There was also the Phoenix Nia Dynasty. Princess Phoenix Dawn stood on a flying ship, her face filled with disappointment. Sword Dynasty. Jiankui. All the dynasties had targeted the Sword Dynasty. It could be said that the Sword Dynasty was targeted like never before. Many dynasties had designs on the Sword Dynasty, especially since the news of Yi Guqin's spiritual estate recovering hadn't spread. Thus, the outside world still thought that Yi Guqin's spiritual estate had been destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. How glorious was it to step on Jiankui of the First Dynasty? Thus, many people wanted to use Yi Guqin's identity as Jiankui to rise up and become famous in the South Sky region. There were many geniuses with such thoughts. Of course, the geniuses of the various dynasties were the main forces in the battlefield. However, the geniuses of the overlord forces were even more dazzling. Compared to the geniuses of the dynasties, the overlord forces were the true peak existences in the battlefield. In one of the four sword pavilions, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, a seclusion area, a clear whistle spread out in all directions, and the entire mountain valley trembled with a rumble. Many disciples of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion were alarmed and walked out to take a look. In the depths of the valley, purple light filled the air and illuminated the sky. A figure appeared out of nowhere, and his aura had reached the 8th heaven of the Divine Palace. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu has come out of seclusion. Tisk Tsk, senior brother Huang Qianqiu is one of the 4 emperors, the proud emperor, and he has the heaven desolate war body. Even the strongest of the Sword Dynasty, Jiankui, had his spiritual estate destroyed by senior brother Huang Qianqiu. He lost all his cultivation and became a cripple. Many disciples of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion exclaimed in admiration. This time, Huang Qianqiu would definitely show off his invincible prowess in the prodigy battlefield and sweep through all 4 directions. Chapter 1208. Purple light burst into the sky, and the entire sky was filled with purple mist. Huang Qianqiu broke out of his cultivation in such a strange scene. His purple hair fluttered in the wind, and his purple eyes were filled with divine light. He was handsome, and his body was slender and strong like a real dragon. He had an intimidating aura about him. as if he was a deity who had just come out of his cultivation. Huang Qianqiu was one of the 4 sovereigns, and he was known as the proud sovereign. This represented Huang Qianqiu's personality. He was arrogant, domineering, and insufferably arrogant. His real opponents were only Di Haoyan and a few others. Tisk Tsk. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu's aura is too strong. Once he uses the Tianhuang body, who can beat him? Many disciples of the Imperial Celestial Sword Pavilion exclaimed. Huang Qianqiu had the Tianhuang body, so his hair, eyes and even his blood were all purple. This Tianhuang body was extremely powerful and domineering. The more he fought, the stronger he became. It was said that he was undefeatable. At this moment, Huang Qianqiu looked into the distance and mumbled to himself, I, Huang Qianqiu, will climb to the top again in this battlefield of geniuses. And that Sword Dynasty's Jinkui. If he shows up, I will definitely dig out his secrets. Huang Qianqiu had never forgotten about Yi Guqin's ultimate sword domain. If he could get his hands on such a powerful technique, Huang Qianqiu could challenge Di Haoyan's authority. In the Starfall Mountains where the Starry Sword Pavilion was located. In a valley, 4 streams of Zhenqi shot up into the sky. In the sky, there were 4 stars twinkling. Soon after, 4 figures appeared. They were 4 young men in silver clothes. They looked similar. They were 4 brothers, known as the 4 young star lords. Each of them had an extraordinary bearing. The 4 of them were 4 of the 7 great bears of the Starry Sword Pavilion. They represented Dubhe, Tianxian, Fekta and Migrez. In addition, there was Gu Xiaoyang of the Mizar Star, Zhou Heng of the Alioth Star, and Song Yuyao of the Alcade Star, who had already passed away. Our goal this time is not only to get the opportunity to break through to the venerable realm in the Holy Emperor world, but more importantly, to deal with Jun Xiaorao of the Luofu Sword Pavilion. Among the 4 people, a young man in the lead said coldly, Of course. With the 4 of us working together, even Jun Xiaoyao wouldn't be able to escape. Moreover, we still have that trump card. It's enough to trap and kill Jun Xiaoyao in the Holy Imperial Realm. Another young man with a similar face sneered. That's for the best. If we succeed, the status of us 4 brothers will definitely rise greatly, and we'll be on par with Gu Xiaoyang, said the 3rd youth with a smile. That's true. Gu Xiaoyang is getting weaker and weaker. Recently, I heard that he couldn't even suppress the geniuses of the Molo dynasty. What a joke. The youngest young man shook his head and laughed. In the eyes of the geniuses from the overlord forces, the geniuses from the various dynasties were naturally inferior, and were not worthy of their attention. It was indeed unexpected that Gu Xiaoyang couldn't suppress a dynasty's prodigy. No matter what, we 4 Star Lords will definitely make the Starry Sword Pavilion famous in the battlefield of prodigies this time. The eldest of the 4 brothers said with ambition in his eyes. In another place of seclusion in the Starfall Mountains, starlight flowed and an aura surged. Gu Xiaoyang, who was wearing a robe and a crown, came out of seclusion. There was a crack in between his eyebrows, and there seemed to be the change of the sun and the moon, as well as the fall of the stars. That was his special ability, the starry eyes. It contained all the stars in the sky and turned into an amazing ability. The battlefield of prodigies will be the stage where I, Gu Xiaoyang, will rise again and become famous. Those opponents will become my stepping stones. Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were filled with confidence and ambition. His starry eyes had reached a higher level, and his strength had increased greatly. Therefore he was more confident. The Luofu Sword Pavilion was located in an ethereal fairyland. There was a pavilion on top of a picturesque peak with a serene scenery. There were 2 figures in the pavilion, a man and a woman. The woman was wearing a long green dress with tassels. She looked elegant. The man in front of her was wearing an elegant white robe. His face was as handsome as a fairy. His hair was like a knife, and his eyebrows were like ink. His face was like jade, and he looked very handsome. He was as ethereal as a fairy, and people would be fascinated just by looking at him. The woman in the green dress was tidying up the clothes of the handsome man in white. She looked worried and said, Xiaoyao, you have to be careful of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and other forces in the battlefield of prodigies. I know. The young man smiled gently. He was none other than the top genius of the Luofu Sword Pavilion, one of the top 10 young masters, Jun Xiaoyao. The woman in the green dress was his partner, Li Qing. Back in the Tianhuang plains of the Saint Origin dynasty, Jun Xiaoyao and Yi Guqin met for the first time. It was when he asked Yi Guqin to pick the superior 9-colored epiphyllum. That flower was the gift he wanted to give to Li Qing. Although there are many geniuses in the Luofu Sword Pavilion, there are very few who are truly top-notch. The Starry Sword Pavilion has the 7 Great Bears, and the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion has not only Huang Qianqiu, but also the geniuses on the Dragon Phoenix ranking, Chen Qingxiao and others. Li Qing looked worried. Don't worry, Qing, but it's still a pity for that person. Jun Xiaorao seemed to have thought of something and shook his head slightly. Li Qing said, You mean, that person who took the God Devourer sword and severely injured the true dragon of Haotian in the Tianhuang plains, Yi Guqin? That's right. It's a pity that Brother Yi died. He was a ruthless person who could take on Di Haotian head-on. If he could join the Luofu Sword Pavilion, the younger generation of the Luofu Sword Pavilion might not necessarily be suppressed. Jun Xiaoyao felt that it was a pity. But then again, there will definitely be many dark horses in the battle of geniuses this time. Xiaoyao, you can choose to make friends with some of them and get them to join the Luofu Sword Pavilion. Li Qing said. Of course. If we don't recruit some geniuses, the Luofu Sword Pavilion will be in trouble in the next sword conference of the 4 Directions Sword Pavilions. Jun Xiaoyao smiled faintly. After bidding farewell, Jun Xiaoyao stepped onto a white crane and soared into the clouds. In the era of great battles, geniuses compete. I have a feeling that the battle of geniuses this time will be very interesting. Jun Xiaoyao stood in the wind with his hands behind his back, like a deity riding on a crane. In a valley of the misty sword pavilion where moonlight shone, Yi Tsungyue, who was dressed in a white robe, had a powerful aura surging from her body. At some point, a ball of inextinguishable light spread out from her body. However, that was not all. Within the ball of light, one could vaguely see a beam of light condensing, bringing with it a sharp aura. Is this the embryonic form of a sword? Yi Tsungyue's expression froze, revealing a complicated and puzzled look. After that ridiculous incident between her and Dugu, Yi Tsungyue felt that the inextinguishable divine embryo in her body seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. However, she did not expect that the embryonic form of a sword was gradually being nurtured within the inextinguishable divine embryo. Could it be? No. This is impossible. Suddenly, Yi Tsungyue thought of a possibility. She shook her head, her face pale, unable to believe it. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.